we're gonna say hi to the one and only Tynan Sylvester. Hey. Hello.
Just let me get set up here.
Yeah. Go ahead. There we go.
All right. How are we doing?
We are doing good. I got the save file here, and we got lots of questions. We've already got a donation to ask you a question. However, we're going to start with the first question from the prep that I have.
Brilliant.
So, yeah. Do you want to give any introduction of yourself or anything like that?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm Tynan Sylvester. Let's see here. I made Rimworld, but certainly not on my own. I mean, originally it was on my own, but there's a bunch of other people who are involved now. We're up to probably 6 primary developers at this point, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I am the original creator of the game, and I think this event is awesome. And I'm incredibly impressed that you put it together, Sui. So I'm happy to help out and answer whatever questions you have.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm a bit stuttery right now, but yeah. So, should I just? Yeah, I should go into the first question.
Yeah, I mean, or we can go over the colony. I mean, I was watching, so
Ooh.
You're just letting it run. I don't know how stable this thing is. It looks like it's pretty decent, but
yeah, it seems to be. A lot of people have been letting it run throughout the time. Also, thank you for that $10 donation. I believe that was Anthro Nagatha. Thank you so much. Yes, so we got a kill box here, which has we're mining some uranium there too, it looks like. Yeah, I haven't touched the colony yet besides letting it run a little. We got a nice little memorial over here, plus our wedding spot. This is where people get married, apparently.
In front of a row of corpses. Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot more cursed before, but someone took the liberty to make it a little less cursed. We used to have these seats covered with some animal corpses, just to spice things up, you know?
Yeah, like you do.
Yeah. We got our... Oh, there's another donation. FG donated $35, and she did give a question, so... Yeah, alrighty. And then we have our stockpiles and all that stuff. We got some hydroponics. We got visitors coming on in from the Confederacy of Trogo. Maybe that's pronounced wrong. You can tell me, actually. How do we pronounce Trogo? Or...
I have no idea, because those words are invented from random syllables that the game smashes together, so you can say it however you want to say it.
Oh, well there you have it, guys.
Yeah.
However you pronounce it is the right way with different factions. I've always been like, these are such weird words. How do I even start pronouncing them, you know?
Yeah.
Then we got our production room right here. It's a little dirty. Don't mind all the dirt. Just kind of look the other way, you know? It's like looking in my bedroom, you know?
Nice.
You just ignore all the clothes on the floor and you look at the other stuff going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. I just told Tynan I have a messy bedroom.
Well, luckily it's COVID, so we have excuses not to show our faces at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Please highlight the plasteel stone cutting table. Wait, there... Who made that?
I see it.
Who made that?
Well, if you want a bit of luxury, why not?
Yeah, you know. We got some nice paved tile flooring here. We didn't quite finish it because we ran out of steel.
I'm glad to see people are messing around a little bit. The super hyper optimized bases are definitely cool, but you lose something compared to, you know, making a marriage hall filled with corpses and stuff like that just for fun, you know?
Yeah. Plus, with, 36 people having the game, you can't optimize. Everyone plays so differently. You can't optimize. You just have to work off it and let it be organic.
Indeed.
All right. So I should start with probably my lead-up question I got here. So which is, what is your like main inspiration when you're creating RimWorld? Was it a specific game? Was it an experience you had? Anything like that?
Inspiration. I mean, everyone knows I've mentioned Dwarf Fortress before, and I've mentioned Dune, and that's been on the marketing. I think inspiration is kind of like, think of it as like sort of this soup that's in your brain that you're always throwing stuff into, and then you pull stuff out later. So things kind of go in and mix together. So
Okay.
like, you know, when I was young, I played Warhammer 40,000, and I was into Terminator, and I read Dune, and I played, you know, more recently I played Dwarf Fortress, and so on and so forth. So it all kind of like mixes together and comes back out. I couldn't point to like one thing that was way more than something else. I would say obviously the direct inspiration, probably the closest game would have been Dwarf Fortress at the time that RimWorld came out. Although it had a very different focus, certainly in a lot of ways, but the general concept was intact in terms of like what the genre is. But for the fiction, yeah, it's Firefly, Dune, Warhammer, all that stuff, you know.
So in your brain soup, what would you say that Dwarf Fortress and Warhammer taste like?
What would they taste like?
Yes, what would they taste like?
So we're mixing metaphors right now.
No, I want to know what they're gonna taste like to you, okay? Tell me what they taste like.
Oh, man. Okay, so Dwarf Fortress would be like some sort of sour, horrible, hard candy with something really delicious at the center. But you have to bite through it first. I'm trying to imagine what that would be. Maybe just a sour candy, something like that.
Yeah.
But like a good one, you know?
Yeah.
But still hard to actually suck on, but that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
And what was the other one you were asking about?
Let's see. You mentioned Firefly and Warhammer, so let's get the taste of those.
You're taxing my powers of metaphor here right now. What would Firefly taste like?
Yes.
Well, let's go with Warhammer first. to me, Warhammer is kind of nostalgic, right? Because I played it when I was young. Like, I remember talking about it when I was in like summer camp when I was like, 12 years old. So to me, it's very like, it tastes like Christmas dinner, like or turkey or something like that. It's something that just goes way back, and it's really kind of comfort foody. It's like completely over the top and ridiculous for what it is, but also trying to be super serious at the same time, which is just wonderful. And there's just nothing else like it. But for me personally, like it's a homey feeling, to be honest. You can always go back to Warhammer and see what crazy stuff they've come up with, or what ridiculous stories about giant demon beings made of cultist flesh bodies, or whatever. There's always something there for you, It's just got that real consistency, which is just comforting. I'm glad it exists. Yeah.
All right. And then, just real quick, I'm going to reintroduce us since we are on the front page of Twitch. I am Sui.
Yeah.
I am a full-time student, part-time streamer. I'm the person who came up with the hot potato, which is what we are doing right now, which is making money for Doctors Without Borders, because they are an amazing humanitarian organization. And I have Tynan Sylvester here with me. He is the person who created RimWorld himself. So...
Not by myself, though.
Oh.
But originally, I did, yeah.
Yeah, well, originally it was by yourself, and now you have a team, right?
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense. All right. And then our first donation question is from Scavenging Mechanic, and he asks, what you think about the Twitch integration mods like Puppeteer by Brains, Toolkit by Huddle, and Utils by Sir Rando.
I haven't looked at them in detail, so I couldn't say like really specifically what they are. I think the concept is amazing in terms of like entertainment value. But yeah, having not actually like looked at them specifically, I don't think I could give a really informed opinion.
Okay, that's fair. And then this next one is a bit of a future-y question. It's a little different, so I'm curious. So it might be an okay question.
Yeah.
It's from Frackle, and he asks, are there any plans to let us actually see what a herb world or some of the other worlds may look like, whether in this game or a future title?
Yeah, so it is a question about the future, and going back to the start of everything in 2013, I've always had a policy of not talking about the future, and it's not because I don't want to, but it's more that I don't actually know. And when we're working on things, plans change a lot. We discover things a lot. Very often, I'm wrong about where things are going. Like, this just happens constantly. Sometimes I'll like write down a little prediction, or I'll think, oh, in 3 months we'll be doing X, Y, Z, or in 6 months we'll be doing, ABC. And I'm just so wrong so often that it's really a good thing that I don't go out and start spreading my guesses around everyone else. So because like all I can do is guess. Ultimately, I don't know the future because we're trying to do things that are novel, which means that we're always inventing, and things turn out in ways that you don't expect, essentially. So that's kind of inherent to the process.
Thank you
of the kind of things that I'm trying to create. So essentially, it's better not to be guessing in public, because no matter how much I say that, oh, this is just a guess, this might not actually happen, things do get taken as promises. People get disappointed. It just becomes this sort of up and down expectations management game, which I think is just an energy drain, to be honest, for the community and for me personally. So I just stay away from it. Now, maybe, I think in future, next time we release a product, we will announce it beforehand. I'm planning to. Like, Royalty came out with just no warning whatsoever, because I took this concept kind of to the extreme. And ultimately, it was fine. But it would have been better just to give people a bit of a heads up. So, yeah, I think there will be some sort of announcement before the next thing happens. But I'm not going to guess at it, and it's not close enough for me to be confident enough to speak about what's going to go on.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of change his question to be something you can probably answer then.
All right.
Do you have any lore about the world that we're on that not many people necessarily know about?
Yeah, so I've been doing a bunch of writing. So there's this old document that's actually linked from the Rimworld main menu, which is just a fiction primer. And it's actually something I wrote just randomly on paper, actually in a notebook, like years ago, just to give myself an idea of what the context was that the game was taking place in. It's a good exercise creatively to try to figure out what your universe is, and then you can draw from it. That said, it does take a huge amount of effort to actually develop universes. Like, it sounds really fun, but world building is actually really an energy thing. So it's not something that has seemed super urgent. So I haven't actually put a lot of energy into it. I've been focusing on the game mechanics, the design, like stuff that people are always clamoring for. People generally aren't begging me to write backstory documents for the game. Usually they're asking about balance and game mechanics and new features and performance and all these sorts of things. But recently I have been doing some more writing and trying to expand that out for my own purposes, if nothing else. So I hope, I kind of have a hope to release something in writing about it, but there's no actual plans about it.
Okay.
But yeah, certainly, I have a headcanon, which I certainly know about, and it would be cool if that was elucidated a bit more clearly in the game and possibly outside the game.
Yeah.
But, there is more than what's written there, but it's not really real till it's published. So
yeah, that
I
makes
wouldn't
sense.
say it has any weight in terms of interpretation.
So do you have any non-canon or things that aren't officially published, concepts or little ideas about the world that you fun facts that you would be willing to share?
Planet descriptions I've written, and speculative histories and ideas about technology and all this stuff. I've got thousands and thousands of words of this, but it's not something that I would be prepared to share again, because it will change and I have no way of predicting what's going to change. So I don't want to say something now and then later on, it just becomes something completely different and everyone's confused / disappointed, essentially. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to introduce us again. I am
All right.
Sui. I'm a full-time student, part-time streamer. I play a large variety of games, mostly indie games, and I've spent half of my time that I stream playing RimWorld itself. And this is the Hot Potato Charity event. We are raising money for Doctors Without Borders, which is an absolutely amazing organization that helps with humanitarian needs. It's done a lot to help with the COVID response, all kinds of stuff like that. And with me here, I have Tynan Sylvester, the man who initially created RimWorld by himself and now has a team that he's working with. And yeah, if you would like to donate to the charity, you can, and you can pay $35 to ask Tynan a question. Yeah, we don't actually have anything in the queue right now, so yeah, you do have to select that incentive. And Daredevil, thank you so much for the $25. That is a question that Tynan's not asking, as it's a future question, and yeah, so I apologize on that. Thank you so much. Your question? Oh, yes. I missed that. Sorry, FG. I totally missed that. So, FG Squared asks, why do you hate eating without tables so much? Also, thanks for the amazing game.
Thank you for streaming, FG. I've watched many of your streams. Some of them you knew about, and some of them you didn't. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, why do I hate eating without tables? Well, have you ever actually done it? I mean, have you ever actually gone outside and sat down with like some food and sat on the floor and eaten it? Like, it's really annoying, honestly. So that would be my fictional reason. I would say just try it, and I would think that's definitely worth a -3 or -4 or whatever it is in the game. For the game, I hate it because like there has to be a reason to build tables, and if no one cares that there's no tables, then no one would ever have a reason to build them. So I think it goes to the general concept of trying to align the player motivation with role-playing, essentially. Like you can just put very limited game mechanics and let people sort of imagine what's going on in the base and put down tables and chairs and build a bar or whatever that makes sense in their head. But if the game mechanics don't actually reward that coherently, then generally people are going to be pushed away from the fun path. The fun path is, something that means something narratively, something that looks like a place people actually live in. This is a storytelling game. So one of the key goals that I'm always pushing for in the design is how do we make the mechanics reward role-playing, essentially. So like, how do we design a system of moods and different ways that rooms can be effective or ineffective, like leaking out temperature or being more and less beautiful that affects people's mood, etc., that rewards players creating spaces that look like something that makes sense fictionally, because you want to align those two things, because they have nothing to do with each other in principle, right?
Yeah.
Like fundamentally, the game is just completely arbitrary chess pieces running code that are just running numbers that essentially could be anything, but we're trying to sort of make it look like something real, and that means setting up an incentive structure so that players will make it look like something real as well, and it makes sense to them. So that's why people get pissed off when they eat with that table, because it gives a reason to make tables, essentially.
That kind of makes me think of like when I was a kid, I would play with dolls and stuff a lot, and it's kind of like it adds a level of like something like that, where you're creating a story playing with whatever toy you have as a kid. This is like the adult version, you're playing with and creating a story, but you're doing it like, but there's actual consequences to like what happens, and that sort of in a way.
Yeah, like so many things in games, it's kind of a 2-layer psychological structure. I mean, this is like the fundamental way that I like to think about game design a lot of the time is you're sort of you're interacting with the player on 2 levels at once. One of them is just the game mechanics way, where, okay, you have a goal, right? And it's something arbitrary, like, you want to win, or you want to make this number really large or get more points or whatever. And you can do that with completely abstract symbols just arranged on a board, and some games work like that, without any narrative layer whatsoever. And then on another level, you're kind of doing a dollhouse thing, or like a role-playing thing, where like, okay, I'm pretending I'm this human being who's in this world where these other characters are here, and we have feelings and thoughts about each other. We care about something that matters, like our health or our relationships or our wealth. And That's like the narrative layer. So, but that in principle has nothing to do with the first one. And you can do them each completely separately, right? You can get a dollhouse or just play The Sims on pause with all the cheats on and just like, you know, put down a house that looks cool and it's just completely in your head. The actual action of it is completely in your head. But what's cool with making a video game is you can try, and this is very difficult, but you can try to align those two things so that they push in the same direction. And so they kind of merge together into this combined experience where you're like, oh, I'm struggling to get a table because I'm so pissed off because I can't eat. And on some level, it's because this is holding you back from being able to, you know, build a more wealthy colony, which is holding you back from winning the game, which is the arbitrary, abstract victory outcome. But on the other level, it's also like my little character Sally is pissed off, and I like Sally, and you know, Sally is someone I care about, and I have like some sort of psychological, like human relationship with Sally, and I want her to be happy, so I'm going to get her a table, which is the dollhouse side of it, the narrative side.
Yeah, I'm
so
gonna reintroduce.
it's hard to align those things together though, but it's something I'm always working on.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm gonna reintroduce us again. So I'm Sui. I am a full-time student, a part-time streamer. I play a lot of indie games. Currently, I am playing RimWorld, which is a absolutely lovely, lovely game. It's a colony management sim. I am also raising money for Doctors Without Borders. This is the Hot Potato charity event. 35 other streamers have had this save file. I am finishing off the event right now, and it's just an amazing event, honestly. Like, there's just this huge group of people, and I am here with Tynan Sylvester. I start to stutter there, don't mind me. I'm here with Tynan Sylvester. He's the person who originally made the game, and he now has a team working with him as well. So yeah, and also thank you guys all for those donations. Thank you Madara, thank you Norstat, thank you Monkey, Pepper MG, Plan of Attack, and Jaded Bailey. Thank you guys so much for those donations. I really appreciate you donating to the event. Daft Panzer, thank you so much as well for that 35. Alrighty, Madara. Wait, is that the next question? Hold on, no, it's not. Is it? No, it is. It is. I'm good. Yeah. So Madara Uchiha asks, if you were to go back in time and re-implement RimWorld with everything you know today, what would you change? Would you still have picked Unity? If not, what other stack would you have picked? Thank you for this amazing game that gave us all so many hours of joy.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for the question. So, yeah, I think I would still have picked Unity. Honestly, like, it worked out pretty darn well. So I can't say I really have a lot of regrets about how it went forward. Like, pretty much everything worked out quite well, and I think there was definitely some luck in that, and some careful choices as well. But you know, like, Unity just solved a lot of the basic problems for us. So I actually think there's a lot of things I don't like about it.
Thank you.
In terms of, like, if you really get into their whole game object system and try to use a lot of the plugins and things like that, I think there's a lot of cruft in there, and there's things that'll slow you down. And there's assumptions that will be a problem. But for RimWorld, it's really just used largely as a compatibility layer. So, like, we built, or, you know, I wrote a whole new object framework, which is like super simple, but also very fast and kind of straightforward to use code-wise to make RimWorld run. Because you couldn't use Unity native game objects to run RimWorld just because they're so heavy. They're for something that's more like a first-person shooter where you have like a few dozen or maybe 100 entities or something acting. But you know, with RimWorld, you have thousands of different things going on all the time, so it needed a lot more kind of custom structure under the surface there. But Unity is also very, very good for compatibility, right? We can just push builds out to Linux and Mac and Windows, and it all just works, which is really great. So there's a bit of hacking to sort of merge those things together. The whole game runs on a single game object, essentially, in Unity, that just runs the entire game by itself. So it's kind of like using Unity, but a lot of the internals are bypassing Unity. But overall, the structure, like, it worked out. So I wouldn't say I have any deep regrets about it. The way this code is written it's kind of organic. It's not super, I would say, like, I don't want to say it's disorganized, but it's not incredibly consistent at every level. Like, it's quite consistent, but there's lots of exceptions here and there, you know? Like, you'll find some games that run on a component framework where everything has to be part of a component that's added to some sort of object in the game world. So, you know, if you have a character, then they have to have like a brain component and a, you know, a leg component, and then like an inventory component. And you're supposed to be able to mix and match these things. And the idea is that can add some flexibility, but it adds a lot of cost. And so, like, RimWorld does that in some ways, but in other ways, it's just the very old school, like 90s style. Okay, this is a character, and this character is, you know, this class, and it has this code, and every character has all this code that's just kind of mixed together, and there's not componentized. You know, you can't actually separate it out in some respects. So I would say it's organic, and every detail of it was kind of done for its very specific purpose. And it worked out, actually. So no, I wouldn't say I regret it. I was actually pretty happy with it.
Awesome. That sounds great though. Like, I don't know. It's surprising that you don't, because you would see all the negatives of it now that you've worked in it. So it's really cool that you are happy
but like,
with it, you know?
The thing is, those are all intentional. Like, something like, okay, it would be great if it, say, performed twice as fast, right? And one way of doing that would be to put in something like trying to get a bunch of the code to run in a multi-threaded model. And that's completely possible to do. But that costs time, that costs effort, and it costs complexity. So the question is not like, do you want to have this extra features? Of course I do, right? Like, if I could snap my fingers and do it, then obviously I would. The real question in real life is always, okay, what do you want to give away to get that extra feature, right? How much content do you want to remove? How many different, like, new story possibilities? How many different incidents? How many AI optimizations? You know, like, how much dumber do you want the AI to be in order to make room to implement this performance thing? You know, or how much less content do you want to have in order to do this? So, you know, it's easy to sort of like think about it like an everything is free kind of model. Like, oh, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and yes, I certainly want those things, but it's so essential to think of it as really a series of choices between alternatives. You're going to get one or the other, and that's always the case, because you can only work on a certain number of things at a time. Even if you scale up the team, you can't do that. You know, that's not a cost-free process by itself. And running larger teams has its own difficulties with coordination. So yeah, like, there's certainly things that, like, I wish were in there in terms of like wishing on a star, but there's not things where it's like, okay, it would have been better to cut X in order to put in Y. Like, I'm pretty satisfied with their choices for the most part.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to introduce myself onto you again one more time. So those of you who have come in from Front Page or from Exili's Raid, I am Sui. I am a full-time student, part-time streamer. I play a lot of indie games. I play a good variety of games. And this is the Hot Potato Challenge, where we are raising money for Doctors Without Borders, which is an absolutely amazing humanitarian organization that works to really help with people in need who need different medical things. They've done a lot to help with COVID. And I have here Tynan Sylvester, the person who made RimWorld initially by himself and now has a team working with him. Also, I have upped the price for asking a question to $40, just because we're starting to get a bit like overwhelmed with questions. So I've upped that price a little bit, just so you guys know, if like they go down a lot, I will go take it back down to 35. But yeah. Alrighty. And we will go ahead and do the next question. This is from Monkey9804. He said, what is Tynan's thoughts on some of the community's cursed creations, like organ harvesting for fun?
Cursed creations. I mean, I would not blame anybody but myself for that. I mean, organ harvesting for fun. Yeah, I mean, we put organ trade into games, so if someone is doing it for fun, yeah, I wouldn't say it's cursed. I would say you're just playing the game the way you wanted to play it. So I'd say that's totally cool. No negative thoughts about it at all.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So it's totally okay if you like grab a prisoner and take all that and then just let them go, you know? Like I find it's kind of funny how you could just like take out all their organs and be like, okay, you can go. And they'll be like, okay, I'll go back home, like just casually, you know?
Well, what else are they gonna do, right? Well, I mean, who says they're casual, right? I mean,
True.
It's good to, you want to role play it a little bit, right? So the game tries to leave space for people to imagine different kind of exchanges and scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually important. That's a principle in the design. Is it doesn't say like, oh, Joe feels X, because we want the player to be able to imagine that in accordance with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not realistic for the game to actually figure out what people should be feeling in different contexts, because analyzing emotional context is like way beyond us, because so many different things can be relevant. So trying to calculate that's impossible. So you could imagine they're just walking away all jolly like, but you could also imagine that they're thinking like, what just happened here?
Yeah.
Who are these people? What am I gonna do? Et cetera, as they stagger across the desert with the painful stitches in their sides. So yeah, if it makes it easier for you, you can think of it one way or the other. It's really up to the player. Just don't take any real life inspiration from any of this stuff, please.
You heard that first, guys. You're not allowed to take real life inspiration from organ harvesting.
Or basically anything else in RimWorld.
Wait, so we're not allowed to take a cat as our pet then?
Yeah, except for that. But honestly, like, cats they don't always do well in this game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you live in those circumstances, maybe it would be better to leave puppers at home.
Yeah, fair. Yes, I am interviewing Tynan, the person who... Oh no! He just got an infestation!
Uh-oh.
No! I'm just gonna move everyone over here. Okay, we'll start on the next question while I panic about this. The next question is, so from Pepper MG, she asks, why did you change the difficulty names in RimWorld? And when are you changing them back? I think that's as a meme, the when are you changing it back part. And then she just went, #bring back merciless.
Yeah, so I think difficulty has always been kind of a design issue, and honestly, it has been one I've struggled with for a long time. Like people do have negative experiences if they feel like the game is just stomping them, essentially. But there's also a difficulty selector, so it creates... essentially, what I want to do with the difficulty presentation is to make it as clear and undeniable as possible, like what you're supposed to expect on each setting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with arbitrary names like Merciless, it kind of... the problem is it sounds like this sort of, man challenge, essentially. Like, oh yeah, I play on Merciless, that makes me cooler. But that's not really what the playstyles are supposed to be. It's not bad to play on a lower difficulty. It's just a different experience. It's not like a weaker thing. It's not like, oh, you're getting, the thick, meaty soup versus the thin soup for babies. You're getting a different experience. So the playstyles that are, with less violence and less things trying to kill you, or weaker things trying to kill you, what it does is it tilts the game more towards, okay, now you have room to breathe, which means you have room to try different things and experiment and role play and so on and so forth. Versus the playstyles that are like very difficult, they really push the player into optimizing everything. As in, you basically have to live in a bunker fort. You don't have space to build cool, like, marriage cathedrals, or choose a colonist that you really like and give them a cool room for no game mechanical reason, etc., etc. So it's not... I'm essentially trying to legitimize all of them by giving them a label that people will understand. And I've thought about like more ways to do that. Like I've had ideas like, okay, maybe we could do a little 2 or 3 part quiz where it's like, okay, do you want to play a challenge, or do you want to create a story, and then the second question would kind of establish within those difficulty bands, like how much have you played of this before, essentially, and then it would recommend a play style for you, for example, because essentially, like, I'm trying to solve an issue where people are playing on a difficulty level that's designed to be unfair, because I want to create that experience and let it be available for people who want it. Because there should be that tiny fraction of the player base who, maybe one time out of they want to try, one time out of playing many games, they want to try playing something that's just like stupidly difficult and just to see how far they can get. Maybe they want to play something that's super hard, even for someone who is experienced at the game. I think that experience should be available, but the problem is it becomes the default in some people's minds. Like, I have to play on this because I've played X number of hours and so on and so forth. And then they get frustrated because they feel like it's unfair. But of course, it's designed to be unfair. Like, right? Like, how do you... the concept of fairness is kind of arbitrary anyways, because there's only one person playing the game. So everything is about you. Like, there's no other person there. So there's no balance between anyone else. So fair is kind of... it's much more complicated. It's more of an emotional impression than anything else. So I would use the term reasonable, but there are definitely difficulties which are designed to be unreasonable because that's a valid experience. But then people become frustrated because they're unreasonable. So essentially, my presentation of the difficulties is desperately trying, and probably not succeeding as well as I should, to communicate, like, this is not supposed to be fair or reasonable. Like, this is, the higher difficulties especially are like just this ridiculous thing that you can do, which might be, act differently with mods or, some other situation. But if you want to play like, something that's just stupidly over the top and will just stomp you, then, play the top one, etc. And if you want something that's, different, like an adventure story type thing, then play the adventure story difficulty.
Yeah, so like, you said, like, you mentioned the whole pressure to play like a certain difficulty because you've played so much time. Like, I noticed that in the community. Like, there's definitely some people who tend to be kind of elitist about the game. They go, oh, I only play on Merciless, like, I only play it losing is fun. And I agree, though, that, like, it does need to be more of the sort of thing where people are just like, oh yeah, I want to play at this one because I want to have this experience, rather than, oh, I want to be the best, which, I mean, being the best is totally okay too. It's just having that mixture of being okay with just playing and having fun and focusing on the story rather than focusing on being the best min-maxer at the game, because I personally don't like min-maxing games. I just don't enjoy it,
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, a lot of life gets sucked out of a game. You gain something by min-maxing and really pushing it. You gain that sort of optimization challenge, which is its own unique experience, which can be really great. Like, I played Dark Souls, but you also lose a lot too. And I think RimWorld has a lot of value on the narrative side, and we put a lot of effort into that. And people like different aspects of RimWorld. People come at it from different directions, which I think is awesome. But when we're thinking about these things, especially from my point of view, I have to remember all these different directions and all these different people, and try to serve them all at the same time, which is like another thing which I think is important to understand, is like, everyone's different. So sometimes something will seem like an obvious flaw or something that obviously needs to be changed from one person's point of view. But, then if you're thinking about a 12-year-old playing the game, it might be a very different point of view. And I'm always trying to take into account those different needs and requirements, which are hard to integrate sometimes. And there's trade-offs between them and difficult choices about how to find solutions that serve all those very diverse types of people who are playing the game.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. Plan of Attack asks, and this is like a joke question, just to phrase it, can we get a Pancake Recipe DLC? Because pancakes.
I would love it if people gave me money for a Pancake Recipe DLC, but I think it's probably better if someone just mods it in. So, yeah, Yeah, I think that would be the new horse armor. So I don't think I could do it. I would. I want to. I don't want to be the most hated person in indie gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Mm.
Alrighty. Well, what if you did something else? I don't know. Add cheesecake, because that's Sui's favorite food, you know? Something like that.
I'll definitely put it on my my ideas list. We'll see if it bubbles up.
Yeah. Yeah, okay,
All
good. Because
right.
we gotta get cheesecake in the game.
Or you can just play the game while eating cheesecake, and then you get the full
Ooh,
experience. That's
dude.
my recommendation.
Dude, yes. What is your favorite dessert? Because, like, I'm obsessed with cheesecake. This is just me
Really?
asking. Yeah.
Um, honestly, like it changes. I had a key lime pie recently that was just amazing.
Ooh.
Um, wow, strawberry shortcake is really wonderful. I couldn't say there's one. Like they're all different seasons, different moods. You know.
Fair enough. That's how I feel
Yeah.
about animals. I go between elephants and tortoises, you know? Depends on my
Nice.
mood.
Nice.
Yeah. And then our next question comes from Jaded Bailey. What are your thoughts on the robust modding community? Do you think it helps keep the game fresh?
I absolutely think it does. I mean, there's thousands of mods out there now. I was a modder for years. Back in Unreal Tournament, I actually started making maps, and I worked on. I helped in a small way on some mod teams for Unreal Tournament, and I made a mod called Elemental Conflict for Unreal Tournament 2003. So if you go back to ancient history, that's kind of where I started. So that's always influenced me in terms of how I approach games or how I think about them. Is those really early experiences of just making stuff just for fun, just getting together on forums and playing around and trying to figure out ways around our limitations. And yeah, it totally does keep the community vital. And I had that experience originally, and I think that's incredibly evident watching how people play RimWorld. Is people play with huge mod assemblages, far more than I originally expected. I thought people would install like 5 mods, but there's people out there with 200 or 300. I'm vaguely surprised that the game doesn't just keel over right there as soon as you try to do that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Now, I mean, in the online community, modding is huge. There's a lot of people who don't play with mods at all, but they're those kind of that huge group of silent people who just don't really talk online very much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like everyone is using mods all the time, but there's a tremendous amount of energy that comes from it. So I love it. I recruit people who have worked on mods, like Oscar, who helps us with our art,
Mm-hmm.
and got in contact originally because he was making a bunch of mods, and he's still actually working on some. I think he recently announced a very interesting mechanoid ship mod. But no, I love it. It's just incredibly gratifying because I was a modder for years, and then I worked at a studio, and then I made a game, and now other people are modding my games. So it's kind of like circle of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely tried to nurture that.
And like
as much
with
as I can.
that, you're probably inspiring someone else to go make a game, and then their
Yeah,
game will get
that's
modded,
it.
and it's just gonna
Indeed.
keep like snowballing, and like a great new, lots of inspiration thing,
I
hopefully.
think it's a beautiful thing. I mean, to me, it's more overwhelming sometimes because you got to remember, like, even with help, I'm just like one guy in a room at a computer, and there's like literally thousands of people doing mods and things like that. So the volume of it is, there's just no way I can keep track of it. Plus, I'm always dealing with issues related to the base game, like struggling with, design questions and things like that, and doing work. So I wish I had time to go over the mods more, but yeah, there's just a tremendous amount of energy there, and I think it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Oh boy, I just blanked. Don't mind me. Just like another reminder to people what's going on. I'm Sui. I'm a full-time student, part-time streamer. I play a variety of games. This is the Hop Potato charity event where we are raising money for Doctors Without Borders. Also, I saw that $50 donation, Miss Donnie. Thank you so much. I will increase the difficulty. There we go. We're now on Adventure Story. There you go. And yeah, also, everybody, thank you so much for all the donations. It's insane. Thank you guys so much. Our next question is, let me think of this one. There's a bunch of words that are starred out. I think Tiltify automatically does that when people swear. So I'm trying to figure out what they're asking here.
It's so profane you can't even tell what they're asking.
I think they just were saying kill boxes, but it censored the word kill from what I can tell.
Okay.
So this is from Anonymous, and they ask, what do you think about what do you think about the fact that many people always build kill boxes in their base? Is kill boxes necessary for a high difficulty game?
I would say it's expected, it's as designed, and yes, it is necessary for a high difficulty game. My thoughts on kill boxes are that it's a strategy that makes sense. It's a strategy that works, and it's an interesting strategy to a degree because there's all these different ways to build a kill box. There's different, different structures, and there's kind of an interesting optimization problem there. And there's trade-offs in terms of how much you're going to pay for it and whether you're going to plan ahead, leave room for expansion, so on and so forth. I mean, my reservation is that I don't want every single challenge in the game to be solved by kill boxes, right? So if you're just sitting there and people just file into this box and get shot down every time, then I think that's cool sometimes. But if every single problem is solved that way, then the game isn't really being what it could be, you know? So that's why we've, for years, this has been obvious. And so that's why I added things like sieges into the game, things like infestations, things like raiders who will drop pod in from above, even centipedes, the super heavy mechanoid enemies. Not so much anymore, but did originally have a kill box breaking role where they were just so heavy that they could take the shots and take out some of your turrets in the kill box. I think nowadays that might not be as effective anymore just because of some balance changes that were necessary since then. So yeah, kill boxes are definitely a cool strategy. They just shouldn't be the only strategy.
Yeah.
And we've done a ton of work, and there's a ton of content in there which is focused on making them not the only strategy.
Yeah, drop pod raids are the scariest thing in my opinion. Like sieges, you can use a mortar and you usually can be pretty fine. But when you get them drop podding into your base, you barely have any time to react. Your moves are bad, too bad, you know? You don't got the choice to do anything about it. You just gotta panic, get ready, go sort of thing, which I've always really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think it's way more dramatic when you're fighting through bedrooms and hallways and kitchens and things like that. Versus, okay, we're out in this prepared battlefield. We're just gonna exchange fire until it's done, essentially. So, it's really hard to design combat in Rimworld simply because the player has so much control over how things are going to play out because they build the entire environment. If you look at most games with combat, the developers build the environment, so they have a lot of ways that they can make it play out in different, they can control it to some degree. But when the player controls everything and the AI has to try to decide against it, players are always going to be smarter than the AI. They're always going to be able to find ways to essentially optimize against it, especially because the AI is just a fundamentally repetitive entity. So it's a real design challenge. So I'm always looking for ways to just sort of fundamentally change the base assumptions of it, and things like infestations and drop pods and sieges and and royalty, some of the shuttle raids and quests and caravan attacks where you go out and attack other people on their bases and things like that are all trying to move in that direction. It's just fundamentally changing the structural assumption of what's going on.
That makes sense. Do you have a favorite kill box design? What type of kill box is your favorite, out of curiosity?
I didn't think there was really a taxonomy of kill boxes that I could name one from, so no, I don't have a favorite one named out. I would say whichever one is the most entertaining for you. No, I couldn't say I have a favorite. No.
There's the far range ones we have on our base here. Is that a missing? Yeah, that's a missing wall, I think, right here. Anyway, I just noticed that. There's also like the really short ranged ones where people use chain shotguns. There's also the tunnels as well, just from like what I know of as like the popular ones. Do you have a favorite out of those three?
I like the classic ones where you have like a box with your guns along the back and people come in and you shoot them in the middle, essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
It just looks more dramatic to me.
Yeah, that is true. It's a lot scarier to use too because it is one of the more risky ones, I think. It's a lot easier for the enemies to get one shot that just goes straight through the eye, you know?
Man, the meta in this game has advanced. Like, I remember players figure out so much stuff over time.
Yeah.
And yeah, like putting doors behind cover and things like that. Like, the level of optimization is just, it's far beyond what one person would ever do. Like if they just played the game without the internet. But yeah, killboxes used to be simpler back in the day, but nowadays I guess that's where we're at.
Alrighty, next question from Hardslide. What was the reasoning for not including birth rates and children in the game? Are there any plans to add those? So you can just answer the first part.
Yeah, so basically it's a big feature. I didn't want to bite it off unless I could really chew it. I mean, it would be fairly straightforward to just like put something in that does it. Like, oh, okay, like this little human, they walk around, and, you know, maybe they do less work or something like that. But I just never. It's definitely a strong concept because it connects with a lot of human needs and human drama. Like, family is important, and that's why we put family in the game originally, in terms of, you know, people getting married and so on and so forth. Those are narrative events that people understand, that are really meaningful, and people tell stories about them. So children is definitely part of that. But it's just it's a giant feature, and it's just, you know, we didn't put every conceivable thing that you could ever think of in the game, you know?
Yeah, can't do that.
I don't think the game you don't have to literally completely run out of ideas to say the game is done. I don't think that wouldn't make any sense, because I'll tell you right now that like my list of ideas only grows over time, never shrinks.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
even as we're implementing some of them and taking them off the list, it always just grows and grows and grows. So that's just not one that's made it to the top, essentially.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then our next question, I'm going to kind of go through them a bit faster. We're catching up, though. We are catching up.
All right, tell me if I should speak longer or shorter.
We're okay right now with this speed.
All right.
If you start getting tired, we might have to speed them up, if that makes sense.
I'm okay.
Okay. Mastani, is that the next one? No, that's not it. Okay, Many, I think it's how you say his name, asks, Hey Tynan, you often mention abandoning or postponing ideas. What is the example of a mechanic you dropped because it didn't work? What mechanic would you like to see more picked up?
I don't know about abandoning things. Like, what I'm referring to when I talk about that is essentially the way I select tasks to work on, or things for us to work on when developing a game, which is basically a process where, as I mentioned before, I have a big pool of ideas that I put everything into, like everything I think of, or when inspired by a movie, or so on and so forth. And that just grows over time. And it's really very easy to put an idea in there. And then over time, I'll just go back to this idea pool over and over and look at what feels good and kind of sort it to the top, essentially, and then try to flesh it out more and evaluate it more deeply. Some things are like an interesting idea, but you really have to spend a few pages analyzing it and writing out how exactly would work before you find out that it has some sort of contradiction that doesn't make sense inside, for example. So, like, yeah, you have to do a lot of work on this to sort of comb through it, expand everything, sort it, develop it, and try to figure out of all this stuff you've thought of, new ideas, old ideas, which ones are the best ones. And this is cool because you get away from that kind of excitement effect when you just think of something and all you can see are the bright possibilities of it, and you're not thinking of the negative side of it. Time really evens out emotionally, like judgments made over time. Like, you write something down, it seems like really awesome, and then you look at it a month later and you're like, well, this is obviously flawed because of XYZ.
True. Yeah, that's just great advice for life, dude. Like, I am the type of person where I'll come up with an idea and I am so like attached to it, and I'm like, we have to do this, you know. For example, with the hot potato, for a while we were talking about doing it like a boys versus girls season, and I was so attached to that for a while, but until like I had a lot of time and kind of thought about the fact that like that's not necessarily the best thing to do, considering like, you know, the political climate and the fact that like that can be kind of weird in that fact, you know. So
yeah, like people talk about subconscious mental processes, and it's actually true. Like if you have an idea and then you just go to like sleep on it, like you'll have different perspective on it the next day, and this goes on and on months and even years into the future. Like there's lots of things that went into Rimworld after sitting in my document for years, and that really improves judgment. So I would say there's a ton of things that were developed but abandoned at that stage, but there were not a lot of things that we built and then threw out. I mean, almost nothing actually, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah.
Because it does mean that original on paper evaluation process worked quite well, and there were other aspects that went into this, but it wasn't just like, oh, let's think of this and this and this and let's just run and do it, and then you find out later they have these horrible problems. Everything was really evaluated repeatedly by different, essentially temporal versions of me. Like I would look at it and then look at it 6 months later, you know, and make really sure that something is as it should be to go in the game. So I thought about this before, but like there's almost nothing that we built and then threw out in the game, which is really great actually.
Yeah, that's insane. Like I think you would. Also, you mentioned like your document. Do you have like a specific document that has everything in it, or like how do you organize all of it?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. I have a set of, essentially, so each person who's working has a list of things they're working on at the moment, which is like 5 or 10 pages generally, and that includes me. And there's also the idea pool, which is like everything that everyone's thought of for years, and so it just goes, it's everything essentially, and that's what I spend a lot of time working on, is trying to analyze that and figure out what's actually the strongest in there. And then essentially concepts go into the idea pool rough, and then they get sorted in, and then they get refined over time. And then after a while, they'll kind of bubble to the top. And then when someone needs something to do, someone has some bandwidth, then you know, the design, which has been developed into a decided design at that point, something that can be implemented, not just an idea, gets shifted to them, and then it goes on their list of things that they're working on. And when that's done, it goes into the implemented document. So I've got 7 of those. I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of pages there's of implemented designs right now, but there's a lot. There's a lot, which is, and we didn't even do it for the first bunch of years. I used to just delete stuff, so that's kind of cool. But it's really simple, but it works well for us.
I mean,
and these are Google Docs that I'm talking about here too. So it sounds like
good.
ridiculously like underpowered, but I've never found, like, I've looked at all these organization tools and such, but I've never found something that is as direct and straightforward as this. Now, if I scaled up the company a bunch more, then we'd probably need another layer, but not quite yet.
Yeah. Like I noticed with the hot potato stuff, for example, like some of the systems we had in place from the very beginning that's like super simple works, you know? Like there's no reason to change a system if you can't think of a way to make it better, you know? So
well, it's not about can't. I think there's very little things in the game that I can't think of a way to make better. But the critical thing about the idea pool is that when you're talking about a sorted list of hundreds of pages of things that you want to do in the game, I want all of them. And I think all of them would improve the game. So when people ask, like, oh, why didn't you do X? It's not, they're always looking for an answer like, oh, it's because I don't like X because of whatever reason. But usually the reason is, oh, because I was doing Y instead, because it's just better. Because it had, you know, it came out higher priority. It looked like it was higher benefit for lower cost. And most likely X is in there in the document. It might be near the top or it might be near the middle or the bottom, but and I also want X. But it goes back to what I was saying before about like, it's, real in game design in real life, game development is a choice between alternatives. It's not a yes or no on a giant list of things that you get for free. It's like, which one is the most important? And just because something is a great idea, it doesn't mean there's not lots of other ideas that are even greater. And that's often the case.
Yeah. And just to explain to everyone what's going on again, because I am seeing a few messages in chat of people asking, I am Sui, if you don't know. I am a full-time student, part-time streamer. I play a variety of games. This is the Hot Potato Charity event. This is the last leg of it, so if you came now, I apologize, but this is the end. 35 streamers have had this base over the last, I think I counted wrong, and the event's actually 126 hours, not 124. Like, I realized that last night. I'm just laying in bed. I'm like, the event's 126 hours, not 124. Good job, Sui.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah. And I have Tynan here with me. He's the person who initially made the game, and he now has a team of people who are helping him as well. But yeah, that's the basics of what's going on. Yeah, so next question. Oh, well, the next thing was a donation of someone saying, congrats to the mastermind of the event. Congrats to all in line. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And then our next one is, he gave us a little more than the incentive even was. He did a $50 donation. Unlooping Fool asks, what motivates you to keep working and putting out so much content for Rimworld?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, like, I always liked working on games. So I don't feel like I need some sort of like external motivation just to be working on a game. Like I said before, I was working on mods back when I was, in high school, and I just did that because I like doing it. I like sitting down and making a thing, and it's even better when people give me money for the thing and then say thank you and like the thing, and it's like, okay, that's a great that works well. But fundamentally, like, I'd be doing this on some level regardless. Like, I have to make something every day. I don't feel good if I don't make some sort of progress on something. So yeah, this definitely satisfies. It's always a challenge. It's tractable, but infinitely difficult. You can always do better at it. And so it's just like, it's a fascinating thing to be working on.
Yeah. For me,
yeah.
I feel like that's the hot potato stuff. Like, I don't get money specifically for the hot potato, but I get money streaming, and I manage this level of success with the charity event. Like, I honestly just do it because I find it fun. Like, I find it so fun to sit down and organize and make the schedule and pick who's gonna be in it, and like all those minor little details,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just fun. Like, I take a break from my homework to work on the hot potato because I just feel like it. Like, it just sounds fun. I have ostrich revenge and it's already dead. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great to have motivation to do something. So, but it's just like an automatic thing, Even when I was like a little kid, I remember I used to go out on the driveway of my parents' house, and I was like, we're talking 5, 6, 7 years old, with like chalk, and I would draw like side-scroller platformer levels, because I used to play Nintendo, like NES. And so I would draw the levels. I'd draw like a big, huge rectangle, and I'd say, okay, that's a skyscraper. And I'd draw a little stick man at the bottom, and that's the player character. And then I'd draw these catwalks and things leading up with helicopters and monsters and things around them. You're sort of like imagining you're going to play it like Contra. And then some sort of prize at the top.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's like me pretending to be a game designer in chalk. So, no, it's just intrinsic. I just like doing it. So it's not hard to maintain that kind of motivation. Not that I don't take breaks and vacations, etc.
Yeah.
I pace myself. I try not to burn myself out either. I'm not pushing to 12-hour days or anything crazy like that.
Good.
Nor is anybody on the team.
Good.
I think it's a bad idea. You pay for it in the end. So, steady progress and a good life is the goal here. And making things, especially creative things and games, is part of that for me.
Yeah. And also, Iron Ducks, thank you so much for that donation. I see you said no questions, so I'm just handling it right now. Thank you so, so much. You guys rock. Thank you so much. Yeah. Oh boy, I just lost what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I think everybody has something like that they did as a kid, even if they don't realize it. Like, I personally would make up little dances to my music as like a performance I could go do. And then I would like make these little tickets out of paper, hand them to my stuffed animals, pretend there was this big show going on, plan it all out. And I feel like
Nice.
that's kind of turned into me streaming and doing the hot potato, you know? Like I'm planning this big event. And I did that on a smaller scale, even as a little kid, you know?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so I think everyone has something like that that kind of like relates to whatever their passion is. Like my dad did a bunch of gardening as a kid. He literally turned his backyard into a garden, his mom's backyard, and now he has this massive garden. That's his thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all have something like that from our childhood, probably.
Yeah, you
yeah.
can look back and kind of see the seeds of interest there, and it can be awesome. What can I say?
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question from Frackle. We have, oh, this is a future question, so I'm gonna change this. How am I gonna change this? I'm just gonna ask it, and we can
We'll see
decide.
what I can say.
Yeah. So, are we gonna see psychic powers used against the player at some point, or is that something you've thought about? That sort of thing, I guess.
I thought about it. It was another one of those. Is this idea really the best thing that we could be pushing on right now? Things. So it essentially just got outcompeted by other concepts. Now, obviously, it makes sense narratively that they would use them against you if you can use them as well. But you got to look at some of those abilities and note how infuriating it would be if the AI was using it on you. Like if they were freezing your people or turning your people against each other. Those kinds of powers are fun to use for the player, but absolutely would, I think, in my judgment, we haven't actually tested it, would be really, really not fun. Played on the other side. So to really tackle that, you would have to. Essentially, it would be a large project, and I think there would be some real value in it, but it didn't seem like the strongest thing to be working on at every moment. I took those resources and I said, you know what, I think it'd be better if this into quests. For example, making quests more interesting and more balanced, making the psychic progression on the player side more interesting, or giving you more tools. Spreading it out so you can get psychic powers in different ways, like the anima tree, for example. So yeah, it was kind of an either or thing, and it just was not. It wasn't the strongest idea. And yeah, it seems arbitrary, but there's a ton of stuff in the game that is quite arbitrary. Like nobody goes to the toilet, right? There's a lot of stuff that it's just like it's a game. That's how it works, and it works out that way. Like you can't try to make everything make absolute perfect sense because there's always questions that you won't be able to answer. You need a bit of freedom that way as a game designer and a game developer to choose something that works in the real world in terms of like as a game development plan and as a game design mechanically, without being bound to be constantly trying to chase down every little like fictional incoherency. You can't spend your time chasing every little fictional incoherency. It's just not a productive pathway.
And something that I saw in chat, there's a mod for that. There's a mod for most
and
everything.
There's probably a mod for it, yeah. So if that's something you're into, see how it plays out. But in general, yeah, that's my philosophy. It is a fictional incoherency, but there's lots of them, and it's not a productive pattern to feel like you have to close all those holes. Because they're just literally not the most important thing. Like when you're actually playing the game, it's not the thing you care about the most. And so we worked on other stuff instead.
Yeah, sorry, I just laughed at chat because there was a tantrum where they were going to destroy something I wanted to keep, so I just like started to arrest them till they finished tantruming. And
I didn't even watch. How is the infestation going, by the way?
Oh, that was fine. It turned out to only be like 3 bugs because of the difficulty I'm on.
Okay.
Yeah, people haven't really been donating to up the difficulty, so I've been okay. I did go up 1. I'm on a base builder now, I believe.
Nice.
So yeah, but I had
no,
to
you're an adventure
rest.
story now. You went from community to adventure. Okay.
Yeah. Wait, no, I went from adventure to what? Wait, was it? Am I the one being? Yeah. I did go community builder to adventure. You're right. It's your game. You'd know. I wouldn't.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah. No, I found that funny though that they're just like she's just casually arresting someone while in the middle of an interview. Okay. Next question. Yes. FG Squared asked, and this is a bit of a future question, so might reword this if you don't want to answer it how it's worded. I can think of how to reword it though. For us achievement hunters out there, will there ever be Steam achievements in RimWorld?
No, I have no plans, and that is actually something where I looked at it and I said, I think this would actually harm the game in really important ways. And the reason is, first off, because it's a very open game in the sense of you can mod it, you can mess with it, you can turn on dev mode and cheat. It's not sort of a locked down channeled experience where we really constrain people into this skill test that's super consistent. So there's that. But more importantly, I think it would really badly distort the player's mental focus and mental motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, I think there's a lot of games out there that are effective as skill-oriented, skill test games where you're looking for that sense of triumph at the end. Essentially, like, it's a challenge, you learn it, you min-max it, you learn the hand-eye coordination, and you're kind of climbing that hill of ability and, experiencing content during that process. And ideally, you get, through a series of triumphs and victories as you succeed at these challenges, which were designed for you to succeed at. And that's kind of the fundamental emotional structure of a lot of games. I don't want to say most, but a very large proportion. And knowing that, I really wanted to take RimWorld in a different direction. I don't want to repeat that again. So that's why, although the game has skill elements and it is meant to be challenging and have a strong element of strategy in a lot of ways, that's not all that's going on. And to me, it's not actually the most important part necessarily. It's been marketed as a story generator since forever, and that's been my internal goal for a long time. And that really requires that the player have the freedom to play and interpret what's going on. That really, you can't... I don't know how to make a game which actually generates a story for you on Silicon and then tells it to you, on the screen. And I'm not sure anybody does. You can go play some of these AI dungeon games with super high-tech text generation neural net systems that are online now, and some of them are pretty amazing, but even they don't really make sense. A lot of the time, they're always making logical errors and so on and so forth. And a game like RimWorld, trying to make the code generate a story is just the wrong direction. It has to happen in the player's mind, and the code really just provides kind of hints and a set of things that are happening in the game which the player can choose to interpret emotionally. So you have to have that room to play around and to role play a little bit and to see it in that light. And the issue is, if there are achievements, now we're saying, okay, it's a message from the developer. It's like an implicit demand. Okay, here's this thing, and you're supposed to get 1,000 kills or whatever, or you're supposed to destroy 20 enemy settlements, etc., etc.
That makes sense.
And that will blow away the other motivation. It's like if you took a dish that had subtle flavors and then just put a bunch of sugar on top of it. It might actually taste good as if you like sweet food, but you would lose what was there in the first place. And if almost every dish out there is already sweet, as in it's already a skill triumph challenge test, then you really want to keep that original uniqueness of what you've got there and try to do something that's different than everything else that's available. So yeah, I think motivations, the summed up answer is they really distort player motivation in a specific direction. They metricize things, which cannot be measured by metrics. You can't measure the quality of a story by some sort of computerized metric.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
it's just so much of game design is like, what is the player thinking about at this moment? Like, what is going on psychologically? And if they're thinking, oh, I have to destroy another settlement to get this achievement, or like, oh, I'm gonna, try to maximize my number of kills or whatever. They're not thinking about their characters. They're not thinking about, how their colonists feel or what their goals might be or what their relationships are, except for maybe in this completely abstract, mechanical way. And there are certainly min-maxers who play that way, but it's not something I want to push people into. It's a legitimate way of playing the game, so I'm not denigrating it. Like, there are high difficulty levels for a reason. We designed the game to be challenging and not to be completely trivialized by exploits, although there are certainly exploits in it. So that is definitely a real play path. It's just, I don't want to push people into it. And I think that achievements would really, really do that.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, because you want it to be a story. And that organic story that the player made. So I only have one more donation question at the exact second. I do have to BRB really, really fast. So if this isn't a question you can really talk on, I will ask another question too.
Okay.
But Anonymous donated $100 for the charity and said, love the game. Any plans for 2 structured stories or vertical integration? That is a plan. Maybe just your thoughts on it. Maybe why it would be complicated or whatever. Could you talk about that for 2-3 minutes, possibly?
Sorry, can you ask the question again? Any plans for what?
2 story structures or vertical integration. So Z levels and having.
Oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I mean, people have been asking about it for years, but that would fundamentally change so many things and add so many challenges. Yeah, it's not Dwarf Fortress. It's not about building grand castles or, huge block structures. And I think the vertical stuff really makes sense for that. Another difference between something like this and Dwarf Fort is Dwarf Fort, the combat is largely melee based, which means line of sight is not really that critical. But when you're doing gunplay, it's really important to understand line of sight, and it's really hard to do that in kind of a 2D layered view.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd have to really think about how that's even fed back. Like, someone shooting at you from up a hill, you can't even necessarily see them on the world slice you're looking at. So that's a real problem to even understand the tactical situation. So then you're looking at, okay, do we actually render it in 3D? Like, holy crap. Control issues, performance issues, it's
makes sense.
Just a different game, and that's just not the game that we're making. It's not a feature. That's a different game.
Okay.
And that's how I look at it.
And going back to my document, I'm going to ask this question, then I'm going to BRB real quick. What was your original hope for the game upon starting development? Were you expecting it to grow such a massive community?
I think if I expected this outcome, I would have been the most stuck up person imaginable. I mean, I had just quit Irrational Games, where I was working on BioShock Infinite. And I was in a room, I had a room, I got some roommates, trying to reduce expenses. I had a chair that I pulled out of the garbage area at Irrational that I took that just had a rip in it, but it was free. It was fine. I was just living off savings by myself, trying to make an indie game. My only goal was not have to go back and work at a big studio again. That was essentially my standard of success. So I remember when we put up the Kickstarter, it had a $20,000 goal, and I was talking to my friends about it, and we were like, oh man, that's so much money. And it's that would give me if I just barely made the goal, that would give me 2 years of runway, right? Because I was working myself at that time. And yeah, essentially the Kickstarter went way, way beyond anything I expected. And the game has continued to go even way, way beyond that since then, just with the sustain that it's had over the years, people still buying and playing it. So no, it's not even the same universe as what I expected when I was working on it originally back in 2012, 2013. We still together? Oh, you don't hear you. Oh, wait, sorry. I think you are muted. But that's cool. All right, Sui seems to be away, and I guess that I'm running the stream myself at this point. So until she's back, I've never done streaming before, and this is what we're gonna do. I'm taking over right now. Yeah, first, thanks to everybody who donated. That's actually really awesome. And, geez, we're up to $62,000. Like, that's impressive. That's real money. So, everyone has been involved in this at every level. I'm very impressed. Starting with Sui for organizing it and everyone who donated. So,
Hear me, of course.
now you're back. Now you're back.
Yeah, right as you start
Oh
saying
man,
that.
I was hoping I was gonna start doing like off-topic questions on the chat. We were gonna go nuts. Oh.
I was as fast as I could be.
Right. Yeah, what's going on? Welcome back.
Have we gotten another donation since? No, we did not. I can lower the donation incentive price back to 35, I think, now that we're not as flooded. There we go. So it's back down to 35. If you want to ask Tynan a question, feel free to. You have the option. You can ask him literally anything. You can ask him, I don't know, his theory as to something random. My brain just didn't have anything, so I just said
The beginning or the end of the universe?
Yeah, exactly. And Briere, thank you so much for donating $6. I really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the charity as well. Thank you so much, Game Slinger, as well.
Yeah. You can just ask me anything you want, or I can ask you questions if you want.
So there was a really great question in the community forum that I put out. The questions that are in the document, by the way, that's where they came from, if you're curious, because I didn't really explain that to you. They're from a forum that I put out to r/Rimworld and to the people in the, ooh, wait, I thought Game Slinger did like a, oh, he did $50. Wait, I saw 5. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the $50. I really appreciate it. Did you increase my difficulty? You did. Okay. Okay. Great. Up to strive to survive. Oh boy, we're starting to get scary. Okay. It is cheaper to lower it, by the way, guys. Just putting that out there. So, great question here. Why are Muffalos blue?
Yeah. So, I actually don't really know. Like, I needed an animal. They were the first animal in the game. So, you know, back in 2013, would have been sometime maybe in the summer that year before the Kickstarter came out, I would have been like, okay, the game should have animals. It's Western themed. It's in space. Let's make it look kind of like a buffalo, but I guess I'll just make it blue. I have no idea why I chose to do that. I guess I just thought it was amusing or something. I made the art in like literally probably 20 minutes in Photoshop, and just threw it in, and it worked. It served its purpose. They're easy to see on the map, and they're adorable. So I think it was just seemed like a good idea at the time. But I actually can't even remember. That's basically it.
Fair enough. And Hybrid
Yeah.
Germ, thank you so much for the $5. And Frackle for the 45. Did you have a question with that? Or, oh, I think he lowered my difficulty. Hold on, let me refresh. Nope. Yeah, he lowered it. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. I need to ask another question. Let's see. I asked all these. You basically answered that one. What was the hardest challenge you had to face while making Rimworld?
Okay. I would say probably the hardest part was the very early stages before I knew what I was making. I went indie basically really early 2012, like February.
Mm-hmm.
So it was over that summer, which was the hardest period, because at that point, I didn't have any like validation whatsoever. I'd never gotten $1 out of any development. I didn't have a team or anything like that. Didn't have a website. I was just like, had just quit, and I was like trying to make a thing. So the question is, what thing to make?
Yeah.
And basically what I was doing was I was making prototypes and then being dissatisfied with them and throwing them out. And this is about 1 month per prototype. So I released some of these in the DRM free version, and they're really, really difficult to play or even understand from your point of view, but they were just like barely enough for me to evaluate it as the developer. So there was like this kind of zombie world roguelike where you'd get a band of survivors and go around collecting supplies. And there was this, Smash TV, the old NES game, inspired tower defense game that also had like a rhythm element in it, which was just way too many ideas in one place.
Yeah.
There was this sort of Agricola-inspired worker placement / mercenary crew management kind of economic sim. So it was going to be a little bit of like Football Manager, but you would manage a mercenary crew. And then I kind of shifted that into like, okay, now you're fighting in a revolutionary, some sort of tactical sim about revolutionaries fighting the government. And that was actually the first one where a piece of code got into RimWorld, because that was where the original combat system came from, like the original combat code for ordering people around and so on and so forth. Making them peek around corners and shoot. But it was hard because I had to keep throwing these things out. And it was always the question of, am I throwing it out because it's too early and it just needs more development to shine? Or am I throwing it out because it's just fundamentally not as great an idea as it should be?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like to me, I really come at it from the point of view of, I think games really are, a lot of their outcome is determined at a really basic level by just like what the game is and some very early design decisions. And then after that, you can polish it and improve it, but that's all kind of multiplied by a factor that's laid down within the first, perhaps, month of development, when you just decide, like, at a basic level, what is this game and how does it work, and like what are the basic pacing of it, the basic scaling of it, the fundamental concepts of what the player is doing. So I had the idea that like I really wanted to get a prototype that worked well, and I would keep throwing them out until I did, because I did not want to end up in a situation where I was polishing something that, like, under the surface was just fundamentally flawed. And it's very easy to get into that situation. But it's also very hard to tell beforehand which situation you're in, because you're looking at some gray box prototype with no main menu and half broken controls and being like, okay, is this not fun because I've been playing it every single day for a month? Or is it not fun because it's ugly? Or is it not fun because it's just fundamentally got a design flaw?
Yeah.
And so that was stressful, essentially. It was exciting but stressful. Sometimes I look back on it and I'm like, it was really cool because, like, with there was a total sense of freedom, but there was also a lot of pressure of like, got to do something, and time runs out. I have to go back and get a job and work for people again, which I didn't really want to do. So, that was the difficult time. Once RimWorld kind of hit, essentially, in the Kickstarter, and I had like my idea pool down, I had the core structure of the game. It was pretty straightforward. Like, I'd bite off another feature, I'd implement it, put it in the game. People would be like, hey, that's great. And then like do another one a month or two later for the next alpha. There were like 20 releases over time, like 1 to 3 months apart, typically. And that was always a fairly steady process. Some of them were stronger than others, but none of them were like big failures or super difficult. There were some technical challenges. But in terms of like fundamentally difficult, it was definitely the early period.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you have any anywhere have you posted any of like the showing of your original ideas at all?
I think there's a video of Animus, which is the rhythm tower defense Smash TV game, on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And some of the games I also included in what's called the prototype pack, which you can get if you buy RimWorld DRM free on our website, rimworldgame.com. That's like a bonus for buying it direct from us.
Huh.
But yeah, those have been around, and if people want to torrent them, that's fine. I don't know why you would, because they're not fun. They're like not even close to being fun. They're like ridiculously unfun. They're, as I said, like, it's not that I would evaluate whether they were fun or not necessarily. I would try to evaluate whether they could be fun, because I knew they generally wouldn't be. Yeah, so they're accessible out there. They're just really not good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's cool though. I didn't know that that was like an option or like that was something that existed. So that's really interesting. So next question is from Oscar oh no, I have no idea.
Pataki.
Yeah, you know who he is?
He's our artist. Did he
Oh,
donate and ask a question?
yes, he
Oscar, you
did.
can just Discord me anytime, man. I'm right here.
That's great that he's here. Oh man, that's so good.
Yeah. He did all the royalty art.
Oh, dude, I love the royalty art. That's so
Thank you for
cool.
the donation.
Okay. He said,
All right. What is Oscar?
what did you do in the 24 hours following royalty release? Did you celebrate? Did you stress out? Shout out from
Oh, no.
Oscar, ya boy.
Yeah. So, no, game releases are stressful, man. Like, especially with something like RimWorld. Like, it's a really complex game. It's hard to test everything, and so people are very quickly finding flaws. And you know, there's definitely some things in there that we should have caught, and I've very pointedly changed our procedures and adjusted some things to make sure that we don't ever repeat any mistakes. But yeah, so right after RimWorld, like there was a lot of okay, collecting bug reports, okay, distributing tasks, try to figure out what's going on, like hot fixing essentially. That's what the experience was. Put it out, and then you're hot fixing until things calm down, basically. Yeah, that's what it was like, and that's what I expect game releases to be like a lot of the time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. We have from Original Texter. Will this event continue in the future? And oh, this is for me. Oh, okay, that's just okay. Yeah. So, Tynan, do trade beacons attract drop pods?
I honestly can't remember. I don't think they. Okay, I literally can't remember. So I don't know. This is actually something that happens. Like, there's so much stuff in the game. Like that decision would have been made in like 2014. So it's easy to forget these kinds of things from my point of view, trying to remember every detail of every game system. But yeah, I actually don't know. But you could probably decompile it and look pretty easily, or a modder could just look at it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah. So the next question is from Scrubbo. I know you're avoiding future content, but when Genetics DLC drops, what? When it drops? What? Okay. What are some elements we can expect? So basically, let's treat this as, have you thought about these, or I guess like growing.
Guys, I've been thinking about RimWorld for like 8 years. Yeah, having thought about everything. I've thought about everything, just like up and down. Yeah, we've thought about it. Whatever it is, we've probably thought about it. So the answer is generally yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless there's like a specific thing you wanted to ask about.
He asked about growing clones for body parts, growing pawns for colonies, splicing traits in and out, horrific errors, turning to attack a colony, etc. Can I train my dog to talk or even lead a trade caravan?
Okay, well, yes, we've generally thought about that stuff. Maybe not training a dog to talk. But yeah, no, vat growing people are part of the backstory. There's a couple of backstories like that. So it's a concept in the game world. It's not really fleshed out or anything. But there's no, announced plans to do anything with this idea.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so another great question that was from the community forum. We have, did you ever have second thoughts about adding some of the more extreme parts of the game?
What, extreme, like organ harvesting?
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, there were definitely discussions about it in terms of how to approach something like that. Yeah, no, we're definitely not just throwing things in willy-nilly, thoughtlessly. Everything goes on the pool, right? And then it gets second thoughts and third thoughts spread out over months, ideally. But I think it's worth. It's easy to essentially be really, really timid around anything that is a little bit provocative on some level, and I think it's good to keep in mind that people are quite diverse and have different reactions, and some people might find something disturbing that I wouldn't. Me personally, I have kind of a dark sense of humor, and I think that comes through in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's definitely expressed there, but it's also good to keep in mind that not everybody does, and some people, might have good reasons for that. So, but yeah, it's definitely something I think of. Stuff like that, I try to put it in the game just because I think it does add something. Characters can become addicted to drugs, and you can, harvest people's organs and imprison people, and so on and so forth. Like, the general moral tone of the game is it doesn't judge you. It really is just like, okay, you can do what you want, and this world is really, really harsh, and if you don't want to do any organ harvesting, like, if you judge it to be terrible, then don't do it. But it also doesn't try to pretend like this kind of thing doesn't exist in the game world, because it does, and I think it adds some, I guess you could say, spice or punch or provocation to it on a story level, as long as it's not like overly exploitative. It's hard to describe, just because players have so much control over how much this stuff plays out in the game. I'm okay with giving players the choice to do things that would generally be regarded as immoral. But I also think it's interesting because something like organ harvesting, for example, you can end up in situations in the game where, like, someone needs a heart because their heart's got an artery blockage or whatever, and it's going to kill them. And, you have a prisoner or something, and they have a heart. And are you willing to, for example, let your character die in order to keep this person who tried to kill you alive? Or what are you willing to do in that situation? So there's another element of it, which is kind of letting the player get into those moral dilemmas, which means you have to have mechanics that look like morally abhorrent things in some circumstances, if you're not going to restrict it. We don't write the situations people are in, so you can industrialize it if you want to, and you can think of yourself however you want to after doing that. But sometimes it comes up in more ambiguous situations, and I wish it did more. Like, I wish these mechanics were more integrated into what felt more like, the kinds of moral choices you see directly designed into an RPG like Mass Effect or so on and so forth. But it's hard to make those situations come up, because we don't control situations. We just control game mechanics, which is like at another level of abstraction. But yeah, I think to try to completely sanitize it and make it all play school would weaken it. So ultimately, I think it makes the game stronger by trying to put something in there with some narrative meaning, something that is important to people, one way or the other, morally, physically. Health is important. People have emotions about it. The game is trying to provoke emotions and thoughts and judgments in a sense of, I did something, and what does that mean about me? What does that mean about the world? How do I feel about it? And having those mechanics in there enhances that.
Yeah, like how the moods get debuffed, like you literally have to deal with the people being upset that this happened because you did a horrible thing, like the little details like that is really what adds to those,
Yeah, and I think of, like, okay, if you're watching The Walking Dead or something, and they're survivors and they have to do this terrible thing to survive, but maybe there's some question of maybe they could survive if they didn't, and they do it, or one character does it, but the other ones don't necessarily approve, but they all benefit, but they all have feelings about it. Like, that's what drama's made of.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so, life is messy, and I think people care about things that are messy, and it's provocative emotionally and narratively in terms of thought. So I think that works. And of course, people will take it and industrialize it, and that's their choice as well. It becomes a meme online, but I don't think that's all it has to be.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Because the internet will take anything and turn it into a meme, which is fine. I'm not against it, but that's not like why it was put in necessarily.
Yeah. I did get a donation of $50 to increase the difficulty again. I increased it before the notification even went through, since I am seeing them before the notifications go through. We do have another question as well. Do you prefer to highlight your design or your programming skills?
For me, design, I'm quite sure that a lot of people who are better programmers than I am. In fact, I know there are. Personally, I've always focused on design. I do programming in order to be able to do design, not the other way around. So I even started out as a level designer back on Unreal Tournament, and when I was working on Bioshock Infinite, I spent most of it as a systems designer. I also did level design. So, you know, if I was to evaluate my skill profile, I think my edge is definitely on the design side. It's like, okay, trying to figure out how do people feel about this, how are players going to perceive this. It's really a psychological understanding. I find technology is fairly straightforward, and I just made sure that we didn't try to bite off any technical challenges, which I wasn't up to. So in a lot of ways, RimWorld's code is actually fairly straightforward. We try to keep it organized, but in terms of like, you know, nearly magical, like John Carmack level optimization programming data structures to render some trillion polygon thing at a 90 FES, you know, on a potato. That's not what I'm going for. I just avoid the technical challenges and do stuff that we can do within our constraints. And there's a huge number of options there, and focus on trying to push into new design spaces and solve those problems and make sure the design and the narrative elements are as good as they can be.
I feel like we can really see that though, like in the game, you know, like it's very much, even the game itself is a design focused game. You know, you're making your colony, that's designing something. You know, you're taking the tile you're given and working with it and, you know, making something, no matter if you're trying to make it look pretty or whatever, you're designing.
And it's organic, right? It's sort of emotional, narrative oriented, you know, as opposed to a more like min-maxy game like Factorio where you're making something and it's like you can really optimize it because everything's really predictable, and that's the up and the down of it. Like you can think through the problems very precisely, which gives you this amazing experience of biting into those puzzles and like seeing the insights, because you can think so far ahead because everything is so consistent. So you can think multiple steps ahead. RimWorld's more chaotic, more organic, more psychological, I think. And that's just a major difference in the focus there.
And I forgot to say who made that who asked that question, but it was Erdelf. So.
Erdelf, famous modder.
Okay. Right? Okay, that's really cool then. Yeah. Yeah, sorry I missed that because I was just like, so many things I'm toggling right now, and yeah. Toggling? I'm juggling. There's the word I wanted. Yeah, but like you can see that it's design focused, which is amazing, you know? Like I feel like a lot of programmers or like coders and developers, you do see that in games where they focus so much on the programming and making it so optimized that at the end there is very little like content or things to do, and you focus very heavily on giving us lots of things to do, lots of replayability, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you're right. I can't emphasize that enough in terms of thinking about game development. If you're doing one thing, you're not doing another thing. So everything is a trade-off, you know? It's not like you're not saying yes or no to ideas, you're saying which one, which is just a fundamentally different way of thinking about it. So yeah, you're right. I think there are some kind of tragic indie stories I've seen where like, someone is really diligent, working really hard, great programmer, but they're just focusing on the wrong thing. And oftentimes it is someone who is like really amazing at programming, and they're working on that, they're optimizing, they're writing an engine or whatever, and just kind of missing the other half of the equation for whatever reason, and all their work kind of comes to naught because they're implementing something very well, but they're just implementing something that isn't really meaningful to people emotionally or in terms of challenge or narrative. So like I really focused on trying to do the emotional psychological aspect at the core of it, and everything else is just good enough to support that, right? Like the game, it performs well enough to do what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't perform a whole lot better than that. The art looks as good as it needs to communicate what's going on and be reasonably, you know, it's not hard to look at or anything like that, but I never actually really spent time trying to make it super beautiful. I'm not competing in that arena. It's just not what I'm going for, you know? You got to focus.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta have your focus. If you try to focus on literally everything too in depth,
Then you focus on nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just becomes a mess at that point, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you got, like, you work on the code, but like, I'm pretty sure from what I can tell, it's like very much not, it needs to be perfect. It needs to work and get the point across and just not really, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a complicated discussion because
Okay.
I don't allow any code for myself or anybody else that is going to incur like major costs on us over time. But it's also not a question of it's not required to like be super optimized super fast. Like it does just have to do what it's supposed to do, but it has to do that in a way that's not going to paint us into a corner later and require drastic refactors.
Yeah.
Code architecture is a very complicated topic that you could spend a lot of time going into, and there's a lot of judgment that goes on in terms of like, okay, how much should I be trying to make this expandable versus how much is okay to just, you know, kind of put in a one-off piece of code that just does this one thing, and we really can't expand it without refactoring it later. And that's a case-by-case judgment call all the time. In every case, the code should be clear enough, but it doesn't have to be like super pristine, like everything is tabbed and spaced in exactly the right way. Like it's an organic thing, but it should still be good, but it doesn't have to like be time-consumptive perfectionist. And there's no way I can really explain what I'm saying because this is like years of calibration that goes into it. Yeah, so there's a balance there.
Yeah. Basically, a TLDR for people who don't code is it's really complicated because when you write code, there's so many little decisions you can make on how exactly the numbers get processed, you know. Think of it as you could have 1 + 1 = 4, no, what? 2 + 2 = 4, or you could have 2 × 2 = 4, and you're trying to think of in the future, are you going to want to have that times being used, or are you going to want that plus being used? I think is a good way to try and simplify it. I took a little bit of coding.
I could give a more direct example of something. Like, let's say you wanted to have an animal. Let's just give a RimWorld example, but this applies to any game. Like, you want to have an animal in the game that can like spit something at a character, right? Right now they can't do it because they can't do ranged attacks. There's just no support for it at all. So, like, the question is, how do you do that? You could do a thing where you just like write some code that just does that for that one animal, but then it's not really configurable. Like, what if someone wants to mod it and apply it to another animal with a different projectile? Like, they want to make an animal that instead of spitting, it throws like a horn or something, or it throws a spike or something like that, right? So do you want to just write the code that does one thing that's kind of hard-coded that one specific way? Or do you want to write code that has parameters that now you can define the animals differently in the data files?
Thank you.
And they can each have different types of projectiles and so on and so forth. And then it's configurable. And there's like kind of a spectrum of what do you really want to make configurable, what's okay to just hard code. And this isn't just about animals and their weapons. It's like, okay, in a quest, you know, how much should it be configurable in our data files? Or like literally every number in the game has to come from somewhere, right? So it either comes from data files or it comes from the code. And sometimes the right move is to make it expandable and put it in the XML where people can mod it and so on and so forth. And sometimes the right move is just to hard code it and just write it the way it's going to work, and then it won't be expandable in that specific way. It might be reusable in other ways in the code, and then like wait, and then maybe later if you need to expand it, you can. So you really got to kind of look into the future and say, okay, what am I going to want from this later? Most of the cost of code is dealing with it after you've written it, not with actually writing it in the first place, because you have to go back and debug it. You have to go back and maintain it. You have to go back and like integrate it with some new thing that you do 6 months or a year later. So it's really kind of trying to find that path to the future and predict what you're going to need and do that like quickly and intuitively to understand what approach you should take to each thing you're trying to implement.
Yeah, you have to make code that you're not going to want to pull your hair out trying to work with, basically.
Unless you never intend to work with it again, right?
Fair.
Like sometimes it's okay to make that kind of code because if you really are confident that you're just not going to look at it again, or you're never going to need to expand it, then the optimal thing is to kind of just hack it together. Or sometimes there's a performance trade-off. Like performant code tends to be very difficult to maintain because to make your code run at high speed, you have to embed assumptions that are specific to your use case into the code. So like, you would just like, how can I? I'm trying to come up with an example of this. Like, you can make a very general rendering system, for example, that would render like anything, right? It could render a city, or it could render an ocean with ships on it, or it could render a fleet of spacecraft, and you could certainly make something like that. But if you really want it to run as optimally as it can, you kind of have to narrow it down to do just the things that you intend it to do. So you would like say, okay, if I'm rendering an ocean with ships on it, then I can always assume that I can't see the bottom of the ships when my camera is above the water level, and I'll just write some code that makes the bottoms not render, and that'll save some time. That doesn't apply if you're doing ships in space. It doesn't apply the same way if you're doing it at sea. But once you've embedded those assumptions into the code, now it becomes harder to change, because if you suddenly next year decide, okay, we want to take this game engine and render a city in it, now you have to like rip those out or do something besides. So optimization has like a long-term cost that way, because it embeds assumptions about what you're actually trying to accomplish, and there's no other way to do it. Versus like a very general solution that's very expandable will tend to be inherently slower in execution, simply because the system can't take those shortcuts because it doesn't know what it's going to be doing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So next question.
Yeah, that one went on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. They're coming in slower now, so we can do that. You know.
Yeah.
Our next question is from Windsoar, and he asks, was there a happy accident that stayed in the game? Example is being the creeper from Minecraft. And then he said, thanks for all those involved participating, organizing, and managing this event. Much love and great job. So thank you so much. And yeah.
Happy accident. I feel like the answer must be yes. Not a lot. There's definitely things that people noticed and loved, and that's kind of a thread that we pulled on more to try to expand that aspect of the game, but it's really hard for me to come up with an example on the spot right now. So I hope I can think about that and then maybe come back to it after another question or two.
Yeah.
But I would say yes, but not a lot, not a ton, because I do a lot of forward analysis. So yeah, as I said before, like stuff gets analyzed quite a bit before we implement it. So things tend to not just happen randomly, but there are definitely things that succeed in ways that were unexpected, which we expanded upon. But I'll try to think of what they would be.
Okay. And we have a question from Anonymous as well. Oh, hold on. This might be a repeat. I mean, it's kind of a repeat.
Just ask it. We'll see.
Yeah. So it's, aside from Dwarf Fortress, what are the games you've enjoyed playing? Why were they enjoyable, and how, if at all, did they influence the evolution of RimWorld? So maybe go in depth on how, like, a couple of the games you mentioned. I think you did go in depth, though.
To some degree. I didn't go into games that much, actually.
Okay, yeah,
Let's see here. Okay, so XCOM or Jagged Alliance 2, like old school tactical, turn-based tactical games with strategic overworld maps. I would say Jagged Alliance 2, but XCOM has this element as well. The game basically the premise is, it's this tactical sim from the 90s. You run this mercenary crew, and you get contracted to essentially invade this tiny island in the Caribbean and depose their leader in order to put their former leader back into power. And so you hire a couple mercenaries, and you're managing their equipment and their personalities, most importantly. And you send them in, and you go through a series of tactical battles where you decide where people move and where they'll shoot, and it all plays out in turn-based mode. And this game was interesting to me because the way they characterized the mercs, there's a list of characters in the game, so they're not generated like in RimWorld. Like, there's specific people. You got Steroid, who's like this Arnold Schwarzenegger type character. You got Spider, who's this woman who's a super good doctor, and I think she's like a sniper as well. They all have their nicknames and so on and so forth, and different roles and skills. But while you're playing through all of this, you're kind of playing through the tactical game, but they have dialogues with each other, but things play out in different ways. Like, someone gets shot and then they're wounded and they're trying to bandage up while another person's coming to try to save them. And these were really powerful stories to me. In terms of like, I really started caring about these characters, even though that they were like pretty thin, just bundles of game stats, really. They had faces and voices and so on and so forth. But the most important thing was the things that had happened to them in my game. And to me, that was powerful. That was like, okay, you can take a game, you can make a game about a small group of people, not a large group of people like Dwarf Fortress, but a small group where you really get to know just a handful of individuals and really feel like you've built up a history with each person and play it forward in a game world that's not all pre-scripted. There are pre-scripted elements in Jagged Alliance, but there's a lot of freedom in there as well. And I would say that having played that would have been something that went into my conception of what's possible with making a game that tries to build a narrative through tactical or strategic challenges involving a small group of individuals who you play over an extended period of time and really build up a history with each one. And like some of the concepts there are, like one of the main concepts is just the idea that you need to have time to get to know somebody to care about them. And that's why RimWorld plays at the length it does. Otherwise, it could have been like a 1 hour roguelike. But if it was a 1 hour roguelike, then you wouldn't have had time to really get to know people. You wouldn't have had time to build up a history of people. Like, oh, you know, Jill got shot 5 years earlier, and so she has this scar which still affects her. And I remember where that happened and when that happened. Like, that's why the characters have scars in RimWorld, because I want history to be embedded in the world and visible. So you think back to, okay, what happened earlier? That's why people bleed to some degree. I want to be able to see the battle after it happened, see the story of it.
Yeah.
So like just a lot of those fundamental ideas when I played those games, and this is years ago, I played it many years before I started RimWorld. Was kind of the inception of them. And yeah, XCOM has some of the same things, and a lot of people have remarked on how attached they get to these randomly generated names and stat bundles in that game. But it has some of the same things where you play multiple battles with these people. They depend on each other. They get injured. They save each other. You get to know them over time, even though there's almost nothing to know in that game. But you just get to feel something about them over time. And so, like, to me, that laid down the fundamental requirements for making a generative narrative game, which is number one, not too many characters, but not too few. Number two, it has to go on for a while, and you have to be in constant contact with these people. And then number three, like, you can enhance that by trying to call back on their history of what's happened before, with things like scars.
Something I think about when you say that is, like, if you have like a knick-knack or something that you've had since you were a little kid, you may not actually care about the knick-knack itself, but you care about the fact you've had it for a long time. And in a way, you can almost think of that like this, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, is like you've had it for a while, and that makes you just appreciate it that much more than, you know, a character that just dies like instantly.
Yeah. Well, it's not even. It's like having it for time is one thing, but I think the critical thing is having it through different circumstances and situations.
Yeah.
Like it's about linkage. Memory is really a system of interlinkages, and I think this comes up a lot. Like, one thing will remind you of things that are associated with it. So if there is a scar in your character, and it is supposed to, I mean, obviously not every single time you look at it, but remind you of, okay, well, that reminds me of the fact that 2 years ago they fought off this infestation, and that reminds me of the fact that that's when, you know, Bob died because he got stabbed by a mega spider and we didn't have any medicine, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about trying to create those associations. And just those games are inspiring just in terms of when I examine my own psychology while playing them, just noticing the fundamental mechanisms that were making me have these thoughts about different things. Like, I remember this, I feel this about this, but why do I feel that? Oh, it's because it's associated with this other thing that I cared about because of this character, and so on and so forth. You know?
There's an insect infestation, and it looks like it's gonna be huge, and nobody cleaned it up last time, so there's just a giant hole in the mountain where they're coming from.
You say nobody cleaned it up like it was someone else's job, Suey.
Yeah, it actually was.
Okay.
Like, I'm kind of scared. I'm gonna wait for this thing to spawn to see how bad it really is. But we're on a decent difficulty though.
Just pull back to the kill box, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably can actually. That shouldn't be too bad at all.
You can probably kite them in, honestly.
Yeah. I can probably just bring I don't even know who I should have kite him though. Probably just whoever's fastest, right? Let's go through and look really fast. Sorry to kind of like not do questions. You can talk about like
No, that's fine.
the strategy here and what you think would be the best
I wasn't
strategy.
even looking at the screen. Let me take a
Whoa,
look.
this person's fast! 7.53. They were fast. Do they have... Okay, if they have bionic... What? Were you the 7 point? Oh, that's melee damage. I'm so dumb. I'm looking at the wrong thing, Tynan. That's what I get for...
It's at the top, I think.
Yeah, I got it. So 1.83 on this guy. I was looking at the totally wrong thing. Of course I mess it up. The one time I look at it, right in front of Tynan. You know, that's the time I have to do it. This is 4.7 on this dude. We got 4.6, so Pock is currently the best. 4.1. So I need the fastest guy to go kite them, is the plan here. What would you do?
4.36 is Ralph. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, but I'm looking for the fastest. I saw 4.7 earlier, and I'm checking to see if there's anybody who beats the 4.7 speed.
I mean, or you can blast them with mortars, or
Yeah, but it is
depends how much effort you want to put in.
Yeah, it's easier just to have the one dude kite him, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have him. Oh, don't go that way, please. Go this way, then that way, then there. Perfect. And everyone else is gonna go up here. Now what I need to decide... Okay, so this isn't set up so I can do it like that. Okay. I'll just try and decide how I'm gonna handle this. Oh, it's not that bad even. It's just I don't have a good choke point. I could probably open up right here and that might be easier, actually. I think I'm gonna go up to the top this door here and we're gonna choke point them instead because having the kill box is not gonna be as good for the bugs. Yeah, that's my plan. Alright, so I got that. Oh, we don't have another donation question at the moment, but Sneaks did give a $20 donation, so that's super awesome. With a very sentimental, I wanted to say how thankful I am for one of your favorite games not only being made, but still being improved, and how proud I am of our community as a whole for the whole charity drive. You're all wonderful. Thank you for putting it together, Sui. Thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you so much. Alright, next question. Let me find a question. Yes, I think I already asked this one. I can't remember. How do you feel about the modding community? Yeah, you already said that. You said you...
Yeah, I covered that.
Yeah. So the next one is, what is your favorite trait and why?
Oh. Oh, man. Some of them just amuse me. Creepy breathing, annoying voice. Or the staggeringly ugly. I just really enjoyed writing the description for that one, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say just the ones that make me laugh. Probably
Yeah.
creepy breathing is the funniest one.
Dude, that was
Just
so
'cause
great.
It's fun to role play. I don't know why. Easy to implement, fun to role play. Big design win there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wait, we just got a donation question from Nos, and he asked, in terms of random events from Storytellers, how random are they? And are there any playstyle event elements that influence these? Or is it just like completely random?
Well, the timing is certainly not random. The difference between like Randy Random and Cassandra or Phoebe is that Cassandra and Phoebe have kind of a semi-randomized but not completely randomized pacing to how often they put out threats against you. So it sort of runs in an on-off cycle where on each on cycle, there's a certain number of threats that are come at you. Now, they might be packed close together. They might be different threats. They might be quite spread apart at like the beginning versus the end of the cycle. Contrast that to Randy, where it's really just every hour it rolls a die and it can send anything at you. Now, it's not completely like, you can't say it's completely random because it's tuned in very specific ways. It's like, okay, there's a certain chance of raids, a certain chance of infestations, there's a certain chance of, a fire, electrical fire incident, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Like it'll look at recent events and things like that. So overall, it's pretty simple, actually, though. I have found it's more fruitful to tune or improve what happens or improve the diversity of what happens rather than trying to make the perfect thing happen at every moment. Simply because it's not really feasible to be deeply analyzing the player's situation and then trying to match challenges against it on like a super fine-grained level. Just because players can do anything and any system like that is going to get gamed. So there's no point in making it smart because you're never going to outsmart humans in that way. It's kind of similar to trying to analyze like the narrative content, try to understand the situation people are in and what it means to them emotionally. It's just not feasible. So what is feasible is trying to make events that are inherently flexible, that kind of scale up and down well, and then you have a lot of freedom in terms of how you use those, and they won't tend to break anything. Now, obviously, it does do a thing where it decides how big raids should be somehow. Obviously, that decision has to get made. And there's a lot of customization in that now. Like, not long ago, we added a way to do that just based on time. Originally, it's based on a kind of a mixture of factor, including population, wealth, recent damage you've taken. There's definitely a bunch of fudge factors in there. And of course, people do start gaming them and exploiting them, so that's fine. I think it does make sense that less people would raid you if your wealth was smaller, because there's less motivation to raid you when you're one dude with a stick in the forest versus when you're sitting on a giant pile of gold.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
So yeah, that functions for me. But yeah, in terms of scaling, there's a bunch of factors that go into it, and population and things like that as well. So yeah. What was the original question? Did I miss it, or did I answer it?
I don't know. I got so focused on handling this infestation.
All right. Well, I hope that answers the question, or at least says something that sounds like it's of value.
Yeah. We got more questions though, so that's a positive. I'm just
no. The question was like, are they completely random or not?
Yeah. Basically.
Well, no, they can't be completely random. Like, there's an algorithm. There's a lot of random elements in that algorithm, but it's all specifically designed within certain constraints. Some elements are random, some elements are not. And it's all tunable at this point as well, if you want to build a custom playstyle.
Also, I lied. There is no others.
Cool.
Yeah, but I can go ahead and grab another one from the document. See, I thought I just saw 35 come in. Maybe I need to refresh. Hold on. I just saw 35 come in. It wasn't through my campaign. It was through the general one. Let me check if they asked a question on that, because I can't check that.
You could ask me a document one first, and then we'll go to them later.
Yeah, because I need to actually get it. Yeah. Let's see. What's the next thing on the document? There's this. So, due to the vast extent of the RimWorld modding community, do you have trouble implementing features that modders haven't already made? Or do you think that any feature you will add will likely have already been modded in? And do you think about this when adding things in?
Yeah, no, it's for many, many years now, mods have been anticipating things we were going to do. And back in the alpha days, I mean, there's only so many really natural ways the game can expand. And if any of those natural ways are feasible for modders, someone will tend to do it. So it doesn't surprise me that people would run ahead of us, especially when, if you have, again, thousands of mods out there, it wouldn't be feasible for us to say, okay, like, we have to make sure that nothing we ever do could ever look anything like any mod that's ever existed. we would just be completely locked in and unable to function essentially as a development group. So I don't like worry about it that much. Essentially, like we do what we're gonna do. I have way too many ideas from us and people on our team and the pool and things like that. So there's a lot of natural directions to go, and or at least there has been. And in terms of overlap mods, yeah, it'll happen. I expect it to continue to happen. Sometimes there are, I think, somewhat misguided criticisms about this, where people say, "Oh, they just like copied this mod or whatever." And it's like, some concepts are pretty darn straightforward. So
Yeah.
just because something is like looks vaguely similar in concept to some mod doesn't mean that we copied or I was even aware of it necessarily.
Yeah. And like it honestly,
especially when there's so many mods out there.
Yeah,
like,
it'd be
crap.
impossible to have something that's nothing like one of the mods. Like,
Yeah.
no matter what you come up with at this point, it's gonna be
Yeah,
similar
that's
in
true.
some way. Like, you're gonna put your own twist on it, but at this point, it's impossible.
So I just don't worry about it too much. And
Yeah.
some of those criticisms appear, and I try to deal with them at that point. But it's not like a broad thing amongst the community. People really complaining about it that much. But yeah, it's just something to deal with,
For sure.
Yep.
Okay. So I got that one question that we got a second ago. It's from I Forgot My Socks. He said, "Quick thanks to Tynan and his team for making Rimworld so amazing and moddable." Oh my gosh, hold on. Sorry, the game's being fast. It's like, let's have things die, because apparently a donkey just died, which I was unaware of. Even being a problem, I thought they were fine. But yeah, modding it has been a real highlight for me the past 6 months. Question: what inspired you to have the final ending instead of something that could lead to a new planet or offer a chance to continue with your pawns?
I would love to do a continuation thing, but again, it's like what is the most important thing to work on question, This is another one of those, like, yeah, like if I could push a button and have it just exist, I absolutely would. This isn't something I think is a bad idea at all. I think it's actually a pretty strong idea, and there's a lot of reasons to do it. It's just the ending of the game. It just didn't seem like the most important thing to be focusing on so far. So, but yeah, I think it's a cool idea. There's a lot of value in it. So, what can I say?
Yeah, and then I did get.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there should be an end to the game. The end of the game is kind of a broad topic to talk about, like, because I think what I've kind of realized over time is that the game will always play out eventually. Like, if you just keep playing it and playing it and playing it and never actually play the end game and launch off and hit the end credits, then the mechanics cannot continue to function forever at every scale. Like, you'll get more and more wealth, more and more colonists and assets. And at a certain point, you will move outside the scope of what the game is designed for. Like, you will move outside of the level of wealth and the level of assets that function. And to me, the end game there is just kind of a hint of like, okay, we designed the game up to this point, and we're going to try to make it not completely collapse after this point. But if you're pushing into like 20-year scenarios where you have this like absolutely gigantic mega base, and you're kind of playing past the end. And I think we couldn't say that if there was no end to the game, but it's certainly a valid choice to play as long as someone wants, if they really just find it compelling to try to make an absolutely huge or incredibly long lasting base. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I also acknowledge the fact that I don't think it would be feasible to, and I haven't tried to make the game play forever at every scale, just continuously without ever kind of run out of content.
Yeah.
Every game will run out of content eventually. So Rimworld does too. And that's why it has that end game in the first place. But yeah, and we added a different end game in Royalty, which is kind of similar in some sense. It's more similar. It's more different in the lead up to it, as in you're getting the title progression to get to the final battle, which is also a hospitality quest. But yeah, there's lots of ideas for other ways to do it. It just hasn't been the most critical thing people tend to focus on how the game is playing rather than how it ends.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, my brain just blanked. But yeah, no, that makes sense. I did get a donation with the Ask Tynan a Question incentive, but they didn't ask a question. So I'm just going to ask a question for them and say, what do you think of their name? Their name is Spuddy, Spuddy, so like a potato spud.
Oh, dear God. Yeah, okay. That's Spud. That's another guy who works with me. Why are you guys stalking me on the stream? You can just Discord me. I'm right here. Anyways, I guess if he has a question, he could just ask me anytime he wants. But yeah,
no, he has to ask on the stream.
He's Australian. He started working with us over summer, so really awesome programmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one person that derped and didn't actually write a question.
All right.
Yeah. So, you need to go rub that in his face and be like, hey, so out of everybody, you're the person who didn't write a question.
Yeah, I'll see if he wants to send me one here. But yeah, if he sends me a question, I'll give it to you after the next one.
Okay. Oh gosh, the next one. Yes, we don't have one lined up, so I'm going to look at the document again.
He just sent me his question. Okay. He asks, what's the secret to making a perfect burger? And the reason he asked this is because on our off-topic developer channel, I tend to post random pictures of burgers that I've made because, I don't know, I really like a lunchtime burger, a nice lunchtime burger. I can make it like 11 minutes. And when you know what you're doing, they're really, really good and easy to make. So, and they're also variable because you can put like all sorts of different stuff on a burger. So yeah, it's kind of my like staple. So they've been subjected to the photos of that. I would say the secret is you got to get your ratio of kind of browned outside compared to the inner meat up compared to what most burgers have. You want more browned outside compared to the amount of inner meat, which tends to be just kind of gray or pinkish. Because that browned outside is really where that like meat flavor comes from, in my opinion. And the way I do that is I do smash burgers usually, where you take a ball of meat and you like press it down into the pan while it's cooking at high temperature. And these things cook in like 40 seconds a side. And that way you do two of them, nice and thin, as opposed to one thick burger. I do two thinner patties, and you stack them up with some cheese in between, and then you get those 4 surfaces, all of which were smashed in, so they're completely covered in that browned deliciousness. And you get 4 of those surfaces, two for each patty, top and the bottom, and that just gives it this like amazing meat flavor compared to how I used to do burgers years ago, where I would just sort of form a patty and then put it on top of the pan and then cook it. But even then, like the surface area isn't good because you're not pressing the meat into the surface. So the whole surface doesn't cook. So it's only about 50% on each side. And even there, you have fewer surfaces to cook. You're getting like 1/8 the amount of caramelization that you're really going for. And everything else is kind of like extras, throw on some onions and pickles and something like that, and should be delicious.
That sounds really good though. So like, are you talking so the sort of burgers where they almost look kind of crumbly and like they have like it's crunchy on it, all the edges?
Yeah, kind of. There's 2 ways to go about it. Like those are what I would call like loose burgers, where you take the meat and you just form like the super loose, like kind of disc of meat with like tons of air sacs and pockets inside. You just sort of crumble it there and then gently press it together. So you don't like compress it into this like hockey puck thing. You just have this like kind of half pile, half patty of meat that just barely holds together. And you put that on the pan, which is difficult because it falls apart. And that's good because all those little crenellations inside the meat, the oil goes in and like the surface area is just amazing. So that's why you get those crumbly burgers out and they taste so good. Because versus a like pressed patty, which is the flat surface, very low surface area. If you let it be super loose, then it gets like super crumbly. And then like all those tiny little shapes get that delicious caramelization. So that's the other way to do it. You can either do a smash burger or you can do a loose burger.
Okay.
Either way works.
Sounds very good.
Yeah.
All right, we got another question from Windsor. He donated another $50, which is insane. Thank you so much. So his question is totally off topic, but thoughts on pineapple on pizza and microwaved coffee. Asking for a friend, also because doctors.
Uh, pineapple on pizza. I'm gonna say it's borderline immoral is how I would put it. To put pineapple on a pizza.
Okay.
Just does not belong. Sweetness on a pizza? Come on, guys. Come on. I mean, everyone has their limits.
Wait, so hold on. If you don't like pineapple on pizza, what's your thought on like those cookie pizzas? You know how like some places will make like cookies that are a pizza?
No.
They'll make
I
a
don't.
cookie, but they'll like make a giant one and they'll cut it like a pizza and they'll put like toppings that are like cookie toppings on it. So it's a cookie pizza? What's your thought on that?
I'm just breathing slowly, trying to assimilate this information right now. Yeah. Okay. I'll have to get back to you about that one. Yeah. I don't want to sound like a purist. I'm not a pizza purist, but everyone has their limits. Zooey, come on.
Like at that point, it's basically a cookie pie, though.
Yeah. Okay. Like, it could be amazing. I'd have to see it and try it to find out.
Now I'm just thinking, like, some places called pizza pie. What's the difference between a pizza and a pizza pie, or is a pizza pie?
Pizza is a type of pie, I believe.
Okay.
I think you can technically call it that. I mean, it's dough with a crust and some filling. Well, not really a filling, depending on the shape. So people call it traditionally a pie.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, pie is like my favorite dessert, and I do really like pizza, so it does kind of go hand in hand, you know?
Yeah, you can eat pie for every part of your meal then.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Beautiful.
Question time once I figure out what I want to ask. Yeah. Okay, so what would you say is the most important things to focus on in game development in order for a video game to be successful?
I would say the answer is generally individual. Like, what you need to focus on is not the same as what I need to focus on, because your baseline skill set and your kind of network of opportunities and challenges would be different for me. People generally need to focus on something they're weak at specifically. Like some people might need to focus on making sure they have someone else who can, do the aspect that they can't do, or so on and so forth, or someone who's making a different type of game. I would say for me, like, if I could give an answer that's meaningful, it would be task selection. So the pattern that I see typically is people doing a very good job on the wrong task. And it's kind of tragic because they're working very hard, they're very diligent, but they're just doing the wrong thing. And so it doesn't actually come to fruition at all. Like, even if they succeed, they still failed because they did something nobody wanted. So you got to make sure that you're doing the thing that you actually need to be doing to make something that is appealing to real people in the real world. And it's easy to fall off this track because everyone, you, me, everybody, we're all subject to our own emotional impulses of like, I like this, I don't like that. And it's easy to sort of get trapped in that sense of like, I like doing X, therefore I'm going to transmute that into a belief that X is the most important thing to do. So, as a concrete example, it's very easy to really enjoy doing some programming thing. And then people just end up really focusing on this programming, but the design problems, they're just sort of ignoring or not noticing, or they're not doing the analysis to find them, because that aspect of the development process just feels more difficult, more uncomfortable. Maybe not obviously harder in the sense of harder to write the words on the screen, but there's some tasks that are more emotionally difficult, that are just harder to sit down and do. It's very easy, like when you're working on code or art or something, to sit down in the morning, right? Okay, I know what I'm doing. I have to make this run 5 milliseconds faster, right? Or I have to finish this piece of art, or, tween these add some animation frames here, smooth out this animation. And it gives a sense of purpose and it feels good at the end of the day. But it can be a trap. It can really be a trap. I've certainly fallen into it many times for years. And the way out is to really be keeping a strong eye on what is actually important, what is actually essential to ship the game and have it be successful. Like, can you ship without this? That's always what I ask. Like, when I look at our idea pool, which is a mechanism of task selection, the critical razor that I'm always trying to apply is, can we ship without this? Like, do we need to do this at all? And often, like, if you really think about it, the answer is, yeah, like, you don't actually need to do that. So, for example, in RimWorld, there's no character animations, right? They're just little capsule people. They just float around. They don't even have hands, like in Prison Architect.
Yeah.
And so it was always a question of like, yeah, we could task up somebody to, or originally it would have been me. I could have spent a month or whatever doing little hand animations and a system for like when the hand should appear, and they have to match their skin color, and this is completely feasible. But it's just like, could I ship without it? Yeah. And so we did, and no one ever really complained about it, and nothing bad ever happened from that. So we just never added any in. It just never became the most important thing.
It's like,
and the answers to that question can be surprising. Like, there's a lot of stuff that seems like, oh, well, we got to have multiplayer, we got to have multi-threading. Like, well, not really. Like, the things that are essential for a successful game are that it's emotionally compelling, that it's understandable when you start playing, that people ideally would tell stories about it so that it spreads by word of mouth through that mechanism. People feel delighted when they play it, and it's different from other things, so you're not just copying and competing directly with someone else who can outspend you, and so on and so forth. You don't need a lot of things that people think you need, and but it's a challenge to be always sort of stepping back that way. It's more of an emotional thing than a direct matter of discipline, time on task. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. You got to be really examining why you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing it because you like doing it? Are you doing it because it feels good to do it today on an hours-to-hour basis? You can indulge a little bit in that way, but you got to be kind of strict about doing the things that actually matter, and not the things that you can actually do away with.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I was just focused on this. Something you said earlier that really stuck to me was you talking about how you have to like mentally be good to do something like that. And my idea on that was like, a great example is you're not going to want to sit down and do your taxes. You have to really like hype yourself up, like, okay, I'm going to do my taxes today.
Yeah.
Going to do them.
Yeah. But
rather
what if
than
you
like being like, oh yes, I'm going to go do
right?
my favorite hobby. I'm going to go sit down, do my favorite hobby. It's such a different experience.
Yeah. Like, it's easy. It's much easier to do a good job than to like make sure you're doing the right job. Taxes are something where like there is a deadline, but if you could trick yourself into thinking that you were doing a great job on your finances and never end up doing your taxes, like that's how it is in games, in game development, because there's no one there telling you what to do, in indie dev at least. And it's very, very easy to trick yourself into thinking that, oh, I'm doing a great job, I'm so diligent, I'm working so hard. But really, in truth, you're self-indulging because you're doing the tasks that you just enjoy doing, and you're avoiding the ones that you don't, and you're not even self-perceiving enough to understand that you're doing that. And I see that pattern all the time. Like, for some people, it's art. They love doing art, and so they make games about art, but they completely neglect, the design or the code. And so it never flourishes in those areas where it really needs to. Or some people it's coding. For some people it's something like PR, where like they love socializing, they love networking, they love talking to people, and they tell themselves, yeah, like this is so valuable because I'm getting to know these people, they'll help promote my game, and so on and so forth, which is true. And that's the thing, it's true that all these things are valuable to a degree, but their value falls off very rapidly when you're not doing the other work that needs to be done to support them. The success of a game tends to be, it's not all the different elements added together, it's more like they're multiplied together. So if you have like a 5 and a 5 and a 5, that's going to do you way better than having a 10 and a 1 and a 1, because 5 times 5 times 5, like 5 for art, 5 for design, 5 for PR, say, that'll give you 125 of output, whatever that is you want, whether it's profit or fame or whatever you're trying to achieve with it, or like download count.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, if you do something that's really great in one area but really deficient in others, or is just focused in the wrong direction, you'll have like a 10 in art, but then like a 1 in programming and a 1 in design. Like you'll end up with a 10 output, which is like less than a tenth of a more balanced approach, where you do the things that need to be done all the time, even though you didn't do any of them as well.
Yeah.
So that's a very simplistic mathematical model. It's not really true, but it's just to elucidate the point. Doing the right thing is so essential. It's so essential that if you always do the right thing, you don't have to do that amazing of a job at it. You just have to have it done, essentially.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
So I noticed there weren't any fire foam poppers anywhere in the base. And
for shame.
had to kill some Boomalopes because they were in the middle of our crops.
Dangerous.
Uh-huh. We're currently beating out a fire. It's okay. We're fine. Fine. Everything's fine. Just thought I'd give you that little update, All right. I got another question from Ranger True. He asks, what are your thoughts on Poe the potato mascot, and why would you protect him with your life?
I'm actually not familiar with Poe. How familiar should I be with Poe?
It's the little, the potato that we use for...
Stardew?
Yeah.
I don't know Poe very well, so I couldn't render an opinion on Poe.
Okay. He's the mascot of the hot potato, and he likes dressing up in whatever theme we're doing.
Wait, was Poe there last year? I don't remember Poe.
No, he's new. We had to do a
Okay.
rebranding at one point for reasons. And, he came out of the rebranding, and he's adorable.
Nice.
His name is Poe, and then Tay is his middle name, and his last name is Toe.
Shocking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the
Yeah,
donation.
and we have to babysit him. That's like what we're doing when we're playing the game. We're babysitting him. We all have to take our turn.
Poe seems. If you like Poe, Sui, then I like Poe. I trust your judgment.
Okay, I think Poe is the best, so...
All right, and so do I.
Alright, and thank you so much for that $50 donation, Arya. It looks like you didn't do a question. I'm guessing you're upping my difficulty, so I'm going to refresh to check that. No, you didn't pick anything. Okay. And you said Christmas is coming and I still have birthday money left. Better give it to a good cause. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much for the $50 donation. And we got a question from, oh no, I don't know how to pronounce this name. Imez? I may? Something like that. And they ask, hi, do you ever try to maintain compatibility with some other sci-fi universes? Did you ever have to drop that compatibility because of a game mechanic you wanted to add?
No, I've never thought that we wanted it to be compatible. I'm not sure. Honestly, this is a concept I've never even heard of before, so it's an interesting idea. But no, actually, I would just want Rimworld to be as good as it can be by itself. So, yeah, I guess not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. And yeah, I'm gonna keep looking at my list here. Alright, if you were to give indie developers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I talked about task selection
Mm-hmm.
for a while, so I would say, yeah, to that, just make sure you're working on the right thing and like really look at why you're working on the thing you're working on, and understand that this is a emotional challenge, not an intellectual one or one of diligence at work. If I could sum it up, I would say that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the other one is like, be ready to put time in. It takes a long time to build up the foundation of all the different kind of skill sets you need. I mean, I was in like 11 years of work on games before I was making Rimworld.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't thinking back to all the things I learned at all those different projects professionally and modding and I needed all of it. So, yeah, it's a matter of managing expectations is important as well, but also not getting disheartened.
Yeah, because there's got to be those moments where it's super slow and it's just like you don't feel like you're progressing, even though you are. So it's getting
Well,
through those too.
I mean, for me, it was always like I just liked doing it, so I never cared if I was progressing because that wasn't the
Okay.
point. I just liked to do it, and progressing was kind of a side effect. So, yeah, I mean that was kind of where I was for a long time. And but we talked about intrinsic motivation before, and that really touches on that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Has to do with that a lot. All right, next question. How did you come up with some of the like weapons that aren't real life weapons in the game? So, for example, they specifically asked about the chain shotgun.
Right. So typically those would be designed in when there was some gap in the like weapon roles. Like we wanted a weapon that could do X, but it didn't really match anything that existed in the real world. And so I would just have to make up something for it, essentially. So, you know, for something like the chain shotgun, I don't remember exactly the reason for it. I think it was like, okay, I wanted something that would trade off range for firepower even more strongly than the shotgun did. The shotgun's kind of a short to medium-ish range weapon with low armor penetration but high damage. So the chain shotgun, I was like, all right, let's push this to a further extreme. It'll do even more damage, but it'll be super short range, approaching like melee weapons here, and it'll add some dramatic moments where you're trying to run up and get in position to shoot this super powerful weapon. And if you get in position, then it's a great victory. But there's also a big risk involved in doing that. And the reverse, where an enemy's approaching and you can tell they're super dangerous because they have this weapon. But if you keep them at a distance, you can deal with it. So that was to fill that gap. And I think, you know, something like the Charge Lance fills the same gap in the other direction, where it's kind of between the bolt action rifle and the sniper rifle. Sniper rifle is really long range. Bolt action is like medium to long-ish. And the Charge Lance is kind of in between, basically. So they were put in to fill specific roles in the balance matrix of the game.
Also, apparently we're like 1,600 away from reaching $65,000 raised for Doctors Without Borders, which is incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's insane. And also, St. Boy State, thank you so much for that $20 donation to Doctors Without Borders. Yeah, but that's insane. It's so close, and they do so much, you know? I know you've talked about like how you really, really like MSF, and yeah, do you want to talk about that at all, or?
I couldn't go into like detail, like super detail in it, but yeah, I would say in terms of like effective altruism, as I understand, they do a lot of work that's really definitely impacting places where it can make a big difference. You know, like medical care is like such a fundamental thing. So, and like you can make such a difference in like that's such a basic level of someone's life. So, I think that kind of work is important. And it's also something everybody can agree on, which is nice.
Yeah, thank you, Anonymous, for the $2 donation, and Norstat for the 10. He said give the muns. Yes, keep giving the monies. Do it. Do it, guys. You can ask Tynan a question if you give the monies.
Indeed.
Yeah. And then another $2 anonymous donation with a smiley face. Yeah. And someone asked what MSF is. MSF is the other name for Doctors Without Borders, which is a humanitarian organization that does a lot to like go to places where there's like people need help medically, like in crisis situations. They've done a ton with COVID and all that stuff. And then Lex says we are naming a donkey Tynan. He donated $15 to name a donkey Tynan. What do you think about that? You're honored.
I'm honored.
Thank you for the donation.
Let me go find a donkey. Let's see, we got Donkey 2 right here. This donkey is now Tynan.
Thank you.
There we go. Perfect. Another Ranger Truth donated 2 and said $2 donation trade. Let's go. Andy Star Phoenix just donated $5. Guys, thank you so much. Like, the little donations add up so much. You know, if you could only give $2 to $5, even if you can only give 1, that's still gonna make a difference. It still does stuff. Like, I can look up on the document and see that yes, that does do stuff, you know? And you know, 20 people giving $5. My brain doesn't want to think that's $100. Like, that adds up, you know? So you gotta remember that, and don't feel bad if you can't give a lot. And Night Spark, thank you so much for the extra for the $2 more. I need to ask another question. What's the worst restaurant you've ever eaten at, and what's the story behind like why it's terrible? You don't have to name drop if you don't want to.
Oh no, I will. I was in Tokyo, and there's this place in Roppongi. I think it's called World Star Cafe or something like that. World Star something. And yeah, it was the worst restaurant I've ever eaten at on like every level. It was just shocking. It's hard to get an amazing burger in Tokyo just because, you know, obviously they focus on Japanese food. There are definitely some good burger places over there, I think. But I went and I tried to get a burger here, and you know, I went in. The whole place was like really dark and kind of dingy. And I sit down, and the waitress comes over, and it was in Tokyo, but it was run by I don't know where they were from. I think maybe they were Russian or somewhere in Eastern Europe, based on the accent. And so she took my order, but she was like really angry. Like, she seemed really angry about something the whole time. Like, I shouldn't even be there. Like, I was some sort of jerk for showing up. And then so, you know, ordered a hamburger naturally. And then while I'm waiting, the staff are like 10 feet away are getting into some sort of argument with each other in a language I don't understand. They're shouting at each other. It was like that scene in The Simpsons where Lisa goes to like Russia Town and the people are shouting and yelling and arguing with each other. But this is the staff. These are not some jerk customers. There was nothing going on. It was the middle of the day. There was almost nobody in there. And so, yeah, there was that brilliant atmosphere. And then the burger came, and it was just like this like really tasteless patty, but then like utterly soaked in this overly sweet sauce. You can really ruin a burger by just like spraying sauce all over it. This thing was like completely coated and dripping. And like just like this sawdust bun. It was just atrocious on every level. So yeah, I'll name them. Poor old World Star in Roppongi. Who knows? Maybe they're doing better now, but a couple years ago, not so much.
Yeah.
But it was an experience, you know. I'm almost glad I went just because it was so bad. Now I can answer that question.
Yeah. You know, having those adventures and stuff, you know, it gives a good story.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't poison me. I did get caloric value out of the food, so I guess there's that.
Yeah.
They tick that box.
And then we got 2 more $2 donations from Night Spark and Frackle. Also, if anybody wants to donate $35, the queue is open. Like, I'm answering questions off the form that I sent out to people a while ago. So if you want to give a $35 donation, like right now, you get your question answered instantly. Just saying. Like, what better deal is there, honestly? It's going to an amazing cause. Someone just said, at least it isn't as bad as that burger I had that one time. Whenever you go somewhere that's like bad.
Thank you for the donation.
Well, if it's bad enough, it becomes good because then you can talk about it later, you know?
Yeah, true.
It's like a movie, right?
Yeah. Alright. So, next community question. Let's see. Do you happen to be friends with or know ConcernedApe / I don't even know how to say his name.
Eric Brone. I think it's Eric Brony or Brone.
Something
I'm actually
like
not
that.
sure about how to pronounce his last name. But yeah, he's the developer of Stardew Valley. Yeah. I've actually never met him, unfortunately, but we've talked online a few times. I used to play Apex Legends with him back, some time ago. I haven't talked to him in a while, but yeah, we've hung out online a bit and chatted. Yeah, really cool guy. I think everybody likes Eric, and I do too. So, yeah, I wouldn't say, we're not like BFFs or anything, but I know the guy. Sure.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned like Apex Legends, so I was curious, like, what genres of games do you play?
Oh man, when I'm just playing for fun, yeah, there's two directions I go on this. One is like when I want to rest my brain.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to go to something where I don't have to think too much, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'll go and play Ultimate Chicken Horse with my friends or something like that, where I don't know if you know this game, but it's a party game, multiplayer, and it's a platformer, and everybody starts and you try to finish this level as fast as possible and beat the other players. And the levels are super short. But what's interesting about it is you build the levels between rounds. So between each round, every player gets to place some object. So you can put down like a spike trap or a platform or a door or like a teleporter or a rocket pack or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're building up the level as you're playing it and try to screw people over by like putting down obstacles that other people can't fulfill. But then you have to try to fulfill it. And for some reason, this game is just so funny. It's just like I just end up killing myself with laughter playing this game because you put down a trap and you're like trying to be so clever about it, and then it kills you or something like that, or like people die in the most hilarious circumstances, and like there's so many deserved comeuppances in that game. So like that's an example of something I play like just to relax.
Yeah.
Completely different from Rimworld, just for fun, to be social, especially this year. But yeah, sometimes I try to do more like, all right, let's play a game that has some relevant elements that we can draw something from, and those are cool. So when I really want to nerd out, I go and play. I was playing Hearts of Iron 4 not too long ago, which is this Paradox grand strategy game about World War II, and like getting really deep into the stats and the history elements of it, and trying to optimize production and everything. I played Japan and I invaded Australia for no good strategic reasons, but it was just entertaining. But that's something I play, and I'm like, yeah, I hope to, learn some concepts from this, or maybe take some inspiration later. Yeah, so I try to cross the genres essentially. But yeah, relaxation, just fun, goofy games. But something like Apex Legends is good because like it definitely takes your focus, but it doesn't really take a lot of intellectual, like tiring horsepower. At least for me, I just sort of play it, and it's not mindless, but it doesn't feel like super heavy in the brain the way that thinking about design problems does, or that thinking about like a grand strategy game can sometimes. And it's fun because you just get to be social and try to aim better than other people, and you get your wins and losses. And yeah, these days I'm trying to do a lot of social-oriented games just to keep in contact with people, because it's kind of hard to do it in real life.
Yeah, for sure. Like, the big boost of Among Us and Fall Guys and all those social games has really come out with
Yeah.
Yeah. What has been your like favorite social game to like play with your friends then during quarantine?
I mean, Ultimate Chicken Horse was great. We were also playing Human Fall Flat for a while.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which is like not like it's like looks like Fall Guys, but kind of different focus. It's more like you move through a level and puzzle it out. But like, it's another. The term we've used for them is fumblecore, where it's like a physics game where you're trying to control the character's hands and arms and things like that. But like your controls are so crappy that you're always fumbling and bumbling around. And that's like half of why it's hilarious, just because you drop things and knock people in the head and knock people off ledges accidentally. So yeah, it's entertaining. It's just funny, and it's relaxing. You can hang out and have a conversation while you play the game. Stuff like that.
All right, we got another question. I don't know how to say the name. It's Oziak, something like that. I'll let them correct me if they want to in chat. But it is, how much do I need to donate to be able to make bridges out of stone blocks, or the ability to I can't speak. Okay. Or for the ability for wood bridges to hold heavy structures?
How much do you need to donate? Well, you could probably find. I think there's a mod for that, so probably nothing. I would assume there's a mod for that, but yeah, for us, it's essentially I'm trying to create a situation where water actually matters. There's kind of a tension in the game where there's a motivation on the player side to essentially regularize the entire map every time, which means shearing off everything that makes it different from any other map and just repeating the same or creating some like super optimized flat rectilinear base. And that's, if you're playing on ultra high difficulty playstyles, that's kind of where you're pushing. That's kind of a min-maxing approach to the game. But the other side of that is that we do want different places to feel different and to feel different long term. I mean, there's a lot of things which are great about the beginning of the game, which kind of fall off later on, and I want to try to maintain those. Like the great feeling of adapting to circumstances instead of just re-executing the same perfect thing over and over. Now, doing a perfect execution thing, I'm not against it. I think it's definitely gratifying and it's something to do, but it's not the focus of the game. So, like, if you choose to play on a river, I would think that the river should be relevant long term. And if you can just create a floor over the river that exactly matches everything about a normal non-river terrain, then the river kind of doesn't mean anything. It's just the cost that you have to pay, and then it disappears. It's better for the river to be a permanent part of the landscape that you have to adapt, deal with the challenges of, and it would increase the difficulty to some degree over just building on a stone surface or building on soil. But if you don't want to build on a river, then maybe choose a different tile that doesn't have a river in it. So if those choices are in the game, if you can choose to be on a river, then you want that choice to actually matter over the long term, not just right at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So that's the reason why, like, bridge is somewhat different from floor, and we don't have like super bridges where you just lay it down and then eventually just forget the fact that it was water in the first place. Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's about expanding like the breadth of experience that the game offers. You can build a base on stilts, and it's limiting, but it's possible. But your concerns are different, and if you want to explore that, then that's your choice. Try to do it, and it'll be really cool. And if you don't want to do that, then play a different environment. But ideally, you'd want to create a situation where, depending on your baseline choices of where to play, your optimal path would be different instead of your optimal path being the same no matter where you choose to build your base.
Yeah, that makes total sense. All right. Do you want to keep going on questions? Because I know you said around 3 hours, so I'm just like checking in with you,
I'm
seeing
fine.
how you're doing,
I mean,
how you're feeling.
Yeah, I'm okay. Okay. I'm good.
Because we are. Yeah, just let me know when I need to like close the ability for people to ask questions too, because I'm going to keep it open until you say that you're starting to get tired and stuff.
Okay, I'm slowing down a bit, but we can do a little more, sure.
Okay, I'll keep going from the community forum again. So, So, when you play RimWorld, do you play it vanilla or do you typically mod it?
I would not generally mod it because I'm always trying desperately to understand how it plays. So if I play it, I'm playing it for a purpose. I mean, I can't really just play it the way you guys play it. Just like from where I am, nothing looks the same. So generally, I watch people play it. Is what I actually do to try to understand how it's playing for other people. How I play it isn't that relevant usually. Or I'm playing like to try out some specific thing that I'm interested in changing or possibly adjusting. But no, I can't remember. I don't think I've ever really played with mods myself.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right, and then we got a question from Zirkrom. It hasn't actually gotten through, but like we don't hear the notification yet. But what is your favorite vegetable? Please show what? Just ask what's your favorite vegetable?
Interesting. Is cauliflower a vegetable?
I believe so. I mean, broccoli is a vegetable and it's very similar.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been enjoying cauliflower a lot recently. It's a really nice side with a steak.
Mm.
You sort of like steam it and then fry it a bit with some butter and some tiny bit of salt and pepper. It's really really satisfying and pretty good for you. So I'm going to go with cauliflower at this moment.
I haven't heard of someone frying it before. So you steam it and
Oh,
then
really?
you fry it?
Yeah, so what I do is I put like half an inch of water in the frying pan and put it in the frying pan. I mean, cut up the cauliflower, obviously. Put it in the frying pan, cover the top, and then just boil the water for a while, and the water will boil off. And by the time the water boils off, you kind of have to catch it at that last moment. And then you put some butter in and sort of sweep it around in the bottom and salt and pepper them somewhat. And then maybe adjust the heat so it doesn't burn. And then the water's gone. So now it's just sort of frying on butter a little bit. And you get a little brown coating on the surfaces that fry, which just adds just steamed cauliflower is pretty damn bland, honestly.
Yeah.
But if you just salt it, pepper it a bit, and fry it with some butter, not a ton because that would just make it really unhealthy, but just fry it with some, and it actually gets really good. Like, I have a plate of it, and I'm like, I'm just gonna eat half, and then I can't stop myself. It's better than popcorn. It's really tasty. So that's what I'm liking these days.
Yeah. Alrighty. So, another community question that I have is, what inspired you to make a medieval themed DLC for a space western themed game?
Well, I don't. Assuming obviously we're talking about royalty.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's medieval themed.
Yeah.
What I was thinking of, concept of royalty is not something that ended after the medieval era. If you look at old Western stories, the Old West historically was like 1865 to 1910-ish, maybe a little later. But there were royals during this period, absolutely. They were running most of Europe and et cetera, et cetera. And some of the stories set in that era do involve these characters showing up kind of in a fish out of water way into your frontier mining town or whatever, and they're doing investments, so they're inspecting something or they're looking at a railway or whatever. And yeah, that was kind of the real world side of the inspiration. So I think maybe some of how they look in the game might throw people off because they have like metal crowns, but just that visual image is not necessarily medieval. Because if you picture the guy in the later 19th century with the top hat, that's royalty. The people who started First World War largely were royalty, and that was 1914. So yeah, it's not medieval themed. It's just feudal. It's themed about a society with a feudal social structure, which is also something that, everyone knows that Dune was one of the inspirations for RimWorld originally, and Dune is completely focused on a feudal sci-fi society, and that's another version of sort of the future feudalistic social structure. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's medieval themed. It's focused on the concept of just this different type of character, and there were a couple motivations for that. One thing I like about the royalty progression is that it focuses on the characters themselves. So you can take one colonist, and then that person gets a new distinct identity as the one with these certain titles or the one with these certain status in the world, and that changes how they interact and what they mean. Anything that's character focused interests me, and I think is strong. I wanted to explore different types of challenges besides just physical combat, and so that's why we were investigating concepts like, what if you could do a challenge where the challenge is being luxurious for this character. So it's a hospitality challenge. So instead of people always just trying to kill you, now it's like, can you make this person sufficiently happy, or can you uphold these standards for them? So, positing the idea of a society with kind of a feudal structure and a different culture, let us put those things together into like into an expansion that would sort of hold together thematically.
Yeah.
And that's what it came from.
I think it actually like works really well with the storyline to me, because I don't know, I personally don't see them as like super medieval. They kind of seem like that space western version of royalty, you know, like they have this fancy pod they use. You know, it would make sense for on this Rimworld for them to have royalty, like, you know, so
Yeah, or
many different nations
for a
over
foreign
time.
society, yeah, to like to show up, and maybe it's a fish out of water thing, right? Like those people don't really belong there. They're not really from there.
Mm-hmm.
They're people who showed up from the outside. Just as, you know, if a European prince was in, you know, the Alamo or whatever, or in the Old West, you know, they would have had certain expectations and conflicts against the people around them, and maybe they would have a tremendous amount of money and power in some sense, but also be very weak in other ways. And I think that juxtaposition is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Zirkrom said, no question, but the correct answer was a hot potato on what your favorite vegetable is.
Yeah, but everyone knows potato is not a vegetable, right?
Yeah, isn't it a starch in reality?
It's a legume,
A
right?
legume. I heard that it was
Legume?
a starch. Okay.
Well, it's a source of starch, right?
Okay.
But yeah, no. Colloquially, it's a vegetable. I don't need to be pedantic about this. He's totally right. I should have answered hot potato, clearly.
And Liam G, thank you so much for that $20 donation. Additional raid support. Yeah, thank you so much for that raid as well. I know I've missed a couple of the raids and stuff. I'm mostly focusing on the interview and donations, so I apologize there. So, yeah, why did I just hear a thing go shooty? Why? Why? Oh, hey, there's a Mega Scarab just chilling.
Thank you for the donation.
Okay. And Agatha and Anthro, thank you so much for that $10 donation as well. Thank you so much. I need another question.
You can always make them up.
I know. I'm gonna have to at this rate.
Flex those interviewing skills. Come on.
Yeah. How did you come up with Boomalopes? There we go. I came up with something.
How did I come
up
with Boomalopes?
Yes.
Well, I'm really into high impact, low cost design ideas. And I was like, you know what would be really, really easy? What if we just make a thing that blows up when it dies? And then that'll create all sorts of like funny and challenging and interesting situations. You can against your enemies, but they can also burn your base down. You got to be careful of them, but they're a tool, etc., etc. So it came from the game mechanics. And after that, I was like, okay, well, we have to give some sort of visual distinctive element so that you can see this. So they get their little boom, bubula things in their backs. And they need a name, so I'll just call them Boomalopes, because I try to choose names that communicate what the game mechanic is. And yeah, that was really it. It was just sitting around, had the idea, and it was extremely easy to implement. And I would say it worked out pretty well in terms of cost benefit.
Yeah. And also, those of you in chat, I am only gonna give him the questions that are donated for, just because this is a charity event and we're raising money for charity. So otherwise, I'm gonna keep going with the questions that have been submitted like a week ago, and continue with like other stuff I come up with, just because this is a charity event. So otherwise, I totally would. It's just I wanna, you know, keep donations rolling on in. No, you're good, Liam G. If you want to just donate $15 more to make that 20 a 15, you can, and ask the question. Like, I'm totally okay with that. You know? Like, I'm totally fine with that. So, yeah. I need to come up with another question now. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Maybe just, like, me saying thank you for the, deep drill. It showing the what's under there now, because that is such a nice feature, dude.
Hey, you remember Spuddy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who wrote the code for that. So.
Oh, dude.
Thank him. But yeah, no, it was necessary.
Yeah, especially with hot potato, we would just sit there and we'd be like,
What was this?
Yeah,
I
like
saw people writing things in planning tool on top of deposits and stuff so they can remember,
yeah.
which is ridiculous. But it really touches on what I said before about like, can you ship without it? Well, we did, and it we it's good to have added it, but like it still worked without any indication of what was under there at all. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that one we were probably cutting a little bit deep, but ultimately like it didn't break anything, and people still played deep drills and enjoyed it. So
Mhm.
yeah, so a lot of stuff. I'm glad it worked out in the end. It was ultimately a good idea to add it in, so I'm happy we prioritized that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Da, da, da. Let's see here. So you said your worst restaurant. What's your favorite restaurant and why?
Oh man, and that's tricky because it's like, what's the best I've ever had versus like, what's my current
If you
favorite?
were to go run to a restaurant right now and get any meal with your exact mood you're feeling, where would you go and what would you get?
Do I have a budget? Like,
No budget, just whatever.
oh, I'd probably just go to like the most expensive restaurant I could find at that point. Like, yeah, I mean, restaurants are really relevant, or relative to what you feel like. Sometimes I just want to hit McDonald's and like get some carbs and fat in me, and that's
Mhm.
just awesome. That's exactly what I need. And sometimes it's nice to go out and get like a really creative, interesting meal at kind of a fancy place that you can learn something from and kind of get an unusual experience that way. Uh, I couldn't name a single restaurant though. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm just coming up with questions the best I can while waiting in the lull. I might like lower the price of it for a
Yeah,
little
you can
bit.
lower my price. I won't be offended. Don't worry.
Yeah. Just as like a final push sort of thing. I might lower it to like 25 as a
Thank you
final
for the
push
donation.
sort of thing. But we got a question from Liam G, which is, all right, here goes. Do insect infestations exist to force people out of their comfort zones?
I wouldn't. I'm not sure I'd say it like that. I mean, they do exist to. The original motivation for the insect infestations was to essentially create a up-down relationship in terms of the choice of building underground. Like you want to have an upside and a downside. So without them, kind of digging your base into a mountain is really, really a very dominant strategy, because it's so easy to defend underground and there's not that many other downsides to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not Dwarf Fortress, and I didn't want that to be such a dominant strategy that that's all anybody felt that they were able to do.
Thank you for the donation.
It's really about trying to make more choices relevant to people. So that does imply creating some, balance between different ways of approaching base building. And the infestations are a way of doing that. That was the original motivation. They also do this something similar to like drop pod raids, which can't arrive underground,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because you can't go to the roof because there's a mountain above you.
For the donation.
So, you get the infestations instead, which of course bypass the kill box, and you get those exciting interior, room to room battles, which I think are just a lot more interesting in so many ways than fighting on a prepared battlefield outdoors in the middle of nowhere near anything that you care about.
I feel like you.
So it's about making it intimate that way.
Yeah. And then you often end up roasting your colonists alive during those on accident,
Yeah. The other reason I like it is where you're going on that is because there are completely different ways to handle it with fire and sealing it off and kind of like mass destruction methods, which is something you don't really get with raids so much.
Mm-hmm.
This goes with the mech clusters as well from Royalty, but it's cool to create challenges that last a long time that you can kind of manage over time. Something like a raid, like it shows up, it attacks you, and it's done, right? It's like you have to deal with it right now, and you really have no choice. Versus something that is there but grows very slowly or creates some low-level problem that you can ignore, but you still want to deal with it ultimately, I think is interesting because that way it lasts for a longer time, and then you get more situations that overlap with each other. And so you can get, okay, the raid came during the infestation, or maybe I can, push them together, or like, we have this mech cluster here, but we're going to wait until this toxic fallout is over before we go deal with it. Or maybe we shouldn't, right? Should we rush out immediately? So kind of turning a super short-term challenge into a medium-term one, I think is a valuable design concept. So that's something I was also pushing on there. So I think there's a number of things that insects do in terms of diversifying the experience.
That makes sense.
Balancing different base structures between outdoors and underground. Creating a long-term challenge that you can deal with immediately, or you can defer. Putting combat in sort of more intimate spaces. Diversifying away from just kill box combats and making combats that kind of bypass that. I try to hit a lot of things with a design. There's never one purpose. There should always be a lot of benefits in order for something to be a really great idea.
I remember in one of my first colonies, I didn't know about like checking for caves and stuff. So I land on a cave tile and it already had bugs on it. And I was just so freaked out because I was like brand new to the game. I wasn't even a streamer yet at that point. Like I had like 15 hours in the game at most. And I was just sitting there terrified of these bugs, and they just kept getting bigger, but I didn't have the gear to deal with them, and I think I ended up dying from them.
Yeah,
So,
you have to go to mass destruction or abandon the base type
yeah, but
approaches in that situation.
I didn't even know I could abandon my base back then,
Yeah, I really wish there was a bit more of that, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
people, I'm always trying to think of ways. I don't think I've succeeded in this, but trying to essentially nudge people to play through challenging situations, just because an unbroken string of triumphs and perfect outcomes in every fight, perfect outcomes in every situation, is just not that interesting narratively or emotionally. It's just ultimately nothing happened. I mean, think of how boring would Star Wars or Harry Potter or whatever be if they just literally won every single encounter. They always fail and then come back and win later. That's how traditional stories work. But if it's just literally triumph after triumph after triumph with zero downside and zero sacrifice, that's what players, that's sort of the min-maxing optimal outcome, but it's also terrible as a narrative.
Yeah.
So there's a really strong tension there in terms of how to even design it or which way you want to go. And I've never fully resolved that one way or the other. And the game kind of tries to be both, but there are sacrifices on both sides.
Yeah, I've definitely barely escaped a tile during a raid that I knew was impossible for me to beat, and just barely scraped by before. And it's probably my favorite thing to happen in the game is that moment when you're like, there's no way this raid is possible given my current circumstances. The only way I can do it is maybe getting a couple of my colonists to flee, and then you try to get them to sneak out without the raiders getting close enough to see them or whatever.
Yeah, I think it becomes more interesting if the player commits to try to win no matter what happens, try to survive and play through everything, even if you have to abandon and start up somewhere else, because then you have a history behind it versus just starting a new game where you've wiped away all the history.
Yeah.
Lots of stories, people lose their homes and then go and build something else, and it's an incredible inciting incident for a story. So, but it's I think there's a lot of patterns that come from other games where it's okay, if something's not going perfectly, then I'll just cut it and restart or reload or whatever. And if someone wants to play the min-maxy approach, I think that's totally valid. It's not the game does support it, and it's designed to make that possible and gratifying. But the narrative focused approach is, I think, really cool and something that I'd love to see more of, and I really want to support it as well.
Yeah, I really enjoy that, and you feel so good when you survive, it's this huge rush of adrenaline. Yeah. All right, next question from Frackle. We have a question saying, if you could, would you want to enter a form of Cryptosleep? And if so, how far into the future would you want to go before being woken up?
I would say no, just because I think I'd have to break every human relationship I had.
Yeah.
That would be the main issue. And also, I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. So
Yeah.
who knows? If I wake
Like,
up anywhere that looks like RimWorld, I would be like, well, damn, I really screwed that up, didn't I?
yeah, or
Um,
like you could end up never being woken up, you know? Like
yeah, there's
that's
that. I mean, or
kind of
you end up one of
risky.
those people in the ancient danger. So you go in and like this beautiful hospital. You're like, all right, I'll see you in 50 years when your stock market has appreciated. And then you end
Uh-huh.
up 1,000 years later, some dude is rifling through your pockets when you're half awake while there's like killer robots around the corner coming after you. Or some
Mhm.
dude with like an organ box is eyeing your sides looking for scars. Yeah, it's just really rolling the dice to do something like that. So I don't think I'd go for it. I'm pretty satisfied with how things are going right now.
That's fair. I mean, when you just don't think about the fact of pandemic and all that, but that doesn't even need to be said,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah,
Yeah. Also,
true.
welcome on
But
in. Oops, sorry.
please continue.
Okay, welcome on in, people from J Jam Jim's raid. Thank you so much for that raid, by the way. I'm currently, well, I am Sui. I'm a full-time student, part-time streamer. I play a variety of games, mostly indie. I am currently in the middle of the Hot Potato Charity event, which if you happen not to know what it's about, it is about raising money for the lovely, lovely charity Doctors Without Borders. They're a humanitarian organization that does crazy things, amazing things for people in crisis. Like, they've done a lot of help with COVID and helping people out with that. And yes, and this base right here, I'm gonna go to that first, is 35 streamers have touched it and put their mark on it. I mean, we did have another base before and then we packed up and moved, so like it's not fully that way, but it's like mostly 35 other streamers have had this save file, made some sort of change to the game. And yeah, I am interviewing Tynan as well, the guy who originally made the game himself and now has a team of people he's working on it with. And if you would like to ask him a question, you can go ahead and donate to the charity and get your question asked. There is a donation incentive on the donate page.
Indeed, awesome. Although I am like getting to the point of starvation, so I should go soon-ish. But I'm happy to answer some more
Okay.
questions until then.
So I
But I'll
say
go like
5
after
more
we
questions.
exhaust the next round of questions. Yeah, something like that.
5 more questions. Okay, we have 2 currently piled. So the next 3 people to donate. And then I'm going to close it. So better hurry up if you want to ask Tynan a question. Alrighty. And Taurus asks, my question for Tynan, I generally play on a larger scale. I like the idea of a bigger colony, 30 to 40 to 50 plus people, and building big things. What do you think of RimWorld's scale? Where did the decision to make the game generally sub 20 pawns come from? Thank you for making my favorite game ever.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the question. I would say it's not even generally sub 20. It's really generally sub 12/10. Yeah, I think I talked about this a little bit before, but essentially it's hard to have a story about 50 people or even 30 people. If you look at like a TV show, say you're at the upper level, you got your Downton Abbey, where like, I don't know how many characters there are. There's like 20 maybe that you really get to know to any significant degree. But really it focuses on a much smaller group. And most stories have smaller character counts than that, just because with so many people, you don't have really time to get to know them as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say it's not really the problem with creating a game where there's like tons and tons of characters is that all the individual quirks just become irrelevant at a larger scale, and it just becomes a statistical exercise. So like, if you have 5 people, the fact that there's only one doctor, really matters, because if that one person is lost or fails or, has a mental breakdown or something, then that's really relevant to the entire scope of the story that you're telling and the entire strategic situation that you're playing. So it works on both levels. But if you have 10 times more people and, you have 10 doctors and one of them breaks, like the law of large averages, all those quirky momentary situations will just blend together. So at any given moment, 2 of them will be broken, 2 of them will be injured, and 6 of them will be online. And maybe at some time, a few more will be injured, and sometimes a few less of them will be injured. But it's just sort of a statistical effect. and you're not really going to notice it. So it's not going to be like, oh, this happened, therefore this happened, therefore this character had this feeling and thought about it.
Yeah.
So that's why it's designed to be constrained that way. So number one, it's hard to get to know too many characters individually. Like, you just don't have time to spend time with all of them. And number two, there are individual foibles and events that happen on an individual scale don't have effects that are large enough to really impact like huge groups of people. Everything has to be done on a group level, which is just a completely different type of event and storytelling. So you can end up where, you know, you're really playing with statistics and you're min-maxing.
Yeah,
and this
sure.
does kind of push against some common like game design instincts where people always want progression, people want to expand, people want bigger, because a lot of games do that, and because it's gratifying to have more, you know, this hour than you had the previous hour, like more people, more money, more tools.
Thank you for the
But the problem is that the result of all that growth destroys the conditions that allow those individual stories to be relevant in the first place, you know? So that's why I'm always struggling to find ways to reward players that don't involve just getting bigger and more powerful. Although that is by far the easiest place to go, and that's where some games go, to the point of parody. Like, you go play Adventure Capitalist, and you start out and you have like $10, and then later you have $1,000, and then later you have $1 million, and then $1 billion, then $1 trillion, then $1 quadrillion, then $1 quintillion. Like, and it just goes up and up and up until you're using numbers with 60 zeros on them. And it's kind of satirical, but also amusing, in that, you know, there's this emotional punch that people get from growing, which is incredibly powerful, but you have to deal with the result of that, which is that now you've grown and you have a bigger amount of stuff to deal with, and that might be a very different game than what you were playing before. So a lot of game systems kind of really work at a specific scale. Control systems, like ways you control the characters, certain assumptions about like how it's balanced, or even things like performance. And going way outside that scale, things start getting shaky and start breaking down, or start feeling imbalanced, or, you know, controlling things can be tedious doing it at a scale of 50 people versus 5 using the same control interface. So yeah, I made an early decision to focus on, you know, a story number of characters, which generally means like 1 to 10-ish, with like maybe up to 15 for like really late game scenarios. But going beyond that is kind of out of scope for what the game is really designed to do. Now, it's one of those, like, yeah, it's out of scope, but I don't want it to completely collapse. So it is still supported, and it's something we test and something I look at and make sure that the game is still okay in those scenarios. But like, there's so many ways to play RimWorld in terms of length and amounts of wealth and duration and sizes of colony in different places. So we have to kind of focus on some that are like the primary goal of, like, this is the one that we're really going to optimize, and the other ones we're going to make sure are like still work effectively, but there has to be a limit, you know. There has to be an upper limit at some point. If it's not 50, it's 80. If it's not 80, it's 150, you know.
Yeah, so you just have to pick that number and go with it.
You have to pick that number, and picking a higher number gives you more breadth, but it also means that everything you're doing is going to be weaker because it's spread over a wider range. You're worried about more different situations. Versus picking a lower number means that you can really work on that and make it as good as it can be within those constraints. So it's a matter of trade-offs again, you know. Choose one thing, but you can't choose another.
Sorry, just dealing with a prisoner heat stroke here. All right, and we got, so guys, just so you know, one more question can be asked, and then I'm closing the donation incentive. Just so you guys know, one more question. Somebody has to pick the final question for Tynan. So one more, and then we got a list of 3 that we're currently queued up. So yeah.
Right on.
All right. So Zircom asks, do you think there are any mechanics or gameplay styles that are underutilized by the player base, not due to design, but just something people don't seem to do?
See, I mean, if I said it wasn't due to design, that would be like blaming the players, which wouldn't even make sense, because it's not like the players have some kind of job to do. So yeah, I don't think that wouldn't even be coherent as a thing to say. So I would say anything that people aren't doing as much as I wish they were doing ultimately comes down to us making the game one way or the other. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I wish we had succeeded at more. Like, I'm really proud of what we did, and everything that works in RimWorld, and a lot of it works wonderfully, better than I might have expected going in. But there's certainly things that I wish worked even more. Like, for example, I wish that more of what I saw online was more about narrative-oriented stuff as opposed to min-maxing stuff. Not that I'm against min-maxing stuff, but like, I think maybe the online chatter tends to focus on it because it's a specific set of players who are like super dedicated in that direction, and that kind of drives them online to trade strategies and so on and so forth. There's a lot of those distortionary effects online in terms of like who shows up to actually talk. It's like 95% plus of RimWorld players will never say anything about it online. So you got to remember like who actually shows up to these discussions is a very specific and unusual group of people. So yeah, I wish we had succeeded better in the storytelling aspects, to be honest. Like, they work, but like I can sort of picture in my head a game where they work even better, and like it's even more compelling and makes even more sense to people, and people are drawn in that direction. It's just hard to say exactly how to execute that. So yeah, I just wish we could have done more of what I was always trying to do with it, essentially.
That makes sense. Yeah. Just have people focus on the story rather than min-maxing then.
Yeah, and like it's an unusual place for a game to go, and there's really obvious reasons for that. Because min-maxing is such a natural thing. It's so like easy to design into that, and as I've always said, like it is something to support, and it should be a strategic game with a lot of scope and scale to it. But I really wanted those narrative elements to be super important, and I think we succeeded to some degree. But it would be, in an alternate universe, there's another version of me that succeeded even more, and I wish I could have done that.
Alrighty, we got the last question too. It has
awesome.
Yeah. So the next question, unless you're wanting to keep going there.
I have to call it at a certain point because my brain will collapse eventually.
Okay, so next question is from Doom DRVK. He asks, have you ever thought about adding a bit of RimWorld merch, like a t-shirt or plushie? I would personally like to buy a Thrumbo plushie to show my support.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about it, but it's just a matter of like focus. Doing that kind of thing well, like I wouldn't want to do it poorly, and doing it well takes significant time and effort, more than you might think. So just based on like, it wouldn't really make any business sense, just because revenues from that kind of thing are really, really small, and I think ultimately I can do more good just putting that time into the game, and that's what I've chosen to do. So yeah, it would be cool. I mean, I'd love to, but it's just a matter of splitting focus. Choosing the right tasks, even if you would like to do something else, or I would love it if these plushes existed. And I've seen some of the homemade ones, which are just delightful. But yeah, the game is really more important, more higher impact, and so that's what I focused on.
All right, and the next question is from Daisuke-kun. He asks, from the last major update, you added new vanilla stuff into the game from popular mods. Are there any plans to implement more? So this is one of those plan questions, so
I don't think we added anything from a mod, although, as we discussed before, certainly we didn't take any features or code or anything from mods. Obviously, some of it might resemble something that came in a mod, because mods anticipate natural developments of the game. But we talked about that bunch a while ago. So, no, generally we don't take anything from mods. Like, it's just not a thing that we do. It tends not to be. Typically, modders do things in a different way than we would, or we could, or we should, and they do different things. So, often something we do will resemble something modders did, but there's differences there in terms of the details, the execution, the integration, and it's more straightforward for us to just execute and do it all ourselves, and that's what we've been doing.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's pretty much like a question that in a way has already been asked. So, yeah. And then AR Phoenix has the last question, and it is, what's for dinner?
Oh, I'm kind of deciding that. Let me see. Oh man, that's an exciting decision to think about. Does anybody get the impression I like food too much?
Not too much. I don't think you could like food too much. Like, you
I'll probably
literally
have
have
some.
to like, you have to enjoy it in order to survive. So
I know, but there are limits. I have some Indian like quasi butter chicken that I made a little while ago, and I have some left. So I think I'm going to steam up some rice and have that. And I'm really looking forward to that. So
Mhm.
yeah, my homemade butter chicken, which isn't really butter chicken, but I still love it.
All right, and then I just got a question in chat that was really interesting. Someone asked if I could ask you if I can send you excess questions that you can answer on Twitter later. So maybe like a donation incentive of a certain amount where I could do that, or are you? That's totally their decision, like their idea. So saying no is 100% okay. Like, do not feel
Yeah,
pressured at all.
I think we've covered it pretty well, and I think it's more fun
Yeah.
to answer them on like live.
Yeah, it's better
so
live. That takes so much time, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting idea to consider for the future, but not this time around, I'm afraid.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, that
Awesome.
was all the questions. Like,
Well, thank you for the interview.
yeah, thank
that
you
was
so
cool. That was
much.
fun.
That was so
And
cool.
this event is really cool. It's really impressive what you put on here. So
And apparently, we're only $1,221 away from making 65,000. So maybe I'll manage that while you are eating.
yeah, how long is the stream running?
Well, technically speaking, it's supposed to run for another like 30 minutes, but I'm gonna go longer than that, honestly.
Right. Cool.
So,
Cool.
yeah, I can't give you a definite amount of time.
Good to know.
Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you so much. Go get
All right.
food.
Thank you very much. I'm and I hope the stream runs really well. And this is all awesome. Everything you've done here is great. And
Yeah.
thank you to everyone for the questions and all the donations too.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Well,
Thank
bye
you.
for now.
Bye-bye.